The night was unusually still, the kind of silence that feels like the world is holding its breath. Across the darkened valleys and misted forests of early medieval Europe, the wind whispered secrets that no one dared speak aloud. In the flickering light of torches, shadows danced against the ancient stone walls of fortified towns, creating shapes that seemed alive, as though the night itself were conspiring. And somewhere in the depths of these silent lands, a dynasty moved like a phantom through history, leaving behind whispers, half-truths, and riddles that even the most meticulous chroniclers could not untangle. They were the Merovingians, kings with long hair, bloodlines shrouded in legend, and a secret that would echo across centuries. To ordinary eyes, they appeared like any other ruling family, yet something about them carried an air of the extraordinary. Their presence was magnetic, commanding, and unsettling all at once. Chroniclers wrote of their charisma, of kings who could sway entire tribes with a word, a gesture, or a simple nod. And while the people admired them, there were those who feared them, for the Merovingians were not merely monarchs. They were said to possess a lineage touched by something beyond comprehension, a bloodline rumored to carry divine significance, and a prophecy that history itself seemed eager to conceal. Legends spoke of the long-haired kings, whose locks were more than mere ornamentation. Some whispered that their hair was a symbol, a vessel of power, a mark that set them apart from ordinary men. To see a Merovingian in person was said to feel like stepping into a current of invisible energy. Their presence left a subtle unease, an impression that the world around them was both larger and smaller than it seemed, shaped by forces hidden from human understanding. And yet, for all their mystique, they were mortal. They laughed, they grieved, and they schemed like any other human. But within the layers of their humanity, a secret pulse of destiny ran like a hidden river, carving unseen paths through the very heart of Europe. The origins of the Merovingians were veiled in mystery, as much legend as fact. They rose to prominence in the 5th century, a time of chaos and upheaval after the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Tribal alliances shifted like sand in the wind, and a young leader named Clovis emerged, ambitious and relentless, consolidating power in a land scarred by centuries of conquest and division. But it was not simply his political acumen that ensured his legacy. It was the aura that seemed to follow him, a combination of calculated brilliance and something indefinably otherworldly. Chroniclers of the time often hinted at divine favor, yet their words were careful, cautious, as if to hint at the truth without fully revealing it. Beyond the recorded history, rumors festered, rumors that the Merovingians were keepers of a prophecy so potent that knowledge of it could shift the fate of kingdoms. No document clearly outlined its contents, no historian dared quote it fully, yet the shadows of this prophecy stretched across every century that followed. Some suggested it was written in cryptic symbols, hidden within sacred texts, or encrypted in objects of immense value. Others claimed it was passed orally from king to king, surviving only in the memories of those entrusted with the secret. And in every version, the prophecy carried an air of inevitability, a sense that destiny itself had been bound to this family's blood. The secrecy surrounding the Merovingians was meticulous. Records were lost, rewritten, or never made at all. Tales of betrayal, exile, and the quiet disappearance of heirs were whispered through cloisters, courts, and forests. Even in times of relative peace, the dynasty seemed to move in a parallel world, where power was as much about perception and fear as it was about actual rule. Their enemies, both known and unknown, acted cautiously, for the cost of challenging a Merovingian was rumored to extend beyond mere politics. It could touch the very soul. It was this blend of human drama and mystical suggestion that made the Merovingians both irresistible and terrifying to the people of their time. To some, they were living conduits of fate. To others, they were men dangerously close to forces they could not control. And to the historians and scribes who dared chronicle their lives, they presented a puzzle that seemed deliberately designed to frustrate understanding. Every document contained gaps. Every lineage had a hidden branch. Every event was shadowed by uncertainty. The dynasty's story was a labyrinth, one in which truth and legend were inseparably entwined. As night deepened, one could imagine the halls of Merovingian palaces, dimly lit by torches and oil lamps, Figures moved silently through corridors, the muffled clatter of shoes on stone the only sound. Plans were whispered behind closed doors. Alliances were formed and dissolved in silence. And always, somewhere just beyond the edge of comprehension, lay the secret that would define their legacy. It was a secret that demanded discretion, that required generations to guard it, and that ultimately left Europe with a riddle whose pieces had been scattered across centuries. And so, as the wind shifted through the valleys and across the forests, the night seemed alive with echoes of a dynasty long gone yet never forgotten. A dynasty whose story was a thread woven into the very fabric of Europe's hidden history, its true power obscured, its legacy both haunting and elusive. The Merovingians were gone in body but not in influence. Their shadow lingered over lands, manuscripts, and whispers that carried forward their secret through the ages. By the time the dawn broke over the misted hills, the world appeared calm, peaceful, and ordinary. Yet beneath the surface, beneath the stone, the parchment, and the quiet towns, the heartbeat of the Merovingian prophecy continued. It was a rhythm that had survived fire, betrayal, and the passage of centuries. A rhythm waiting for those who dared to listen closely enough to hear it. And as we begin this journey into the world of Europe's silent secret, one question remains. What is the truth hidden behind the long hair, the cryptic texts, and the whispers that refuse to die? What secret was powerful enough to be buried beneath centuries of silence? The Merovingians were more than mere rulers. They were a dynasty that seemed to bridge the realms of the ordinary and the extraordinary. Their story began in a time of turbulence, when the Western Roman Empire had crumbled into fragments, leaving a continent in chaos. Clans, tribes, and fledgling kingdoms vied for control over lands soaked in history and blood. Amid this upheaval, a young leader named Clovis rose to prominence, demonstrating a mixture of cunning, ferocity, and an almost uncanny instinct for power. But while Clovis's political achievements were remarkable, it was the aura surrounding him, a presence that seemed to command both fear and devotion, that truly set the Merovingians apart. Chroniclers of the time often struggled to describe Clovis and his successors without veiling their accounts in mystery. Some spoke of kings who could inspire absolute loyalty with nothing more than a glance, who seemed to possess an understanding of events before they unfolded. This was no mere exaggeration of medieval storytelling. Those who lived under the Merovingians spoke of a family whose influence went beyond diplomacy, law, and military might. It was as if the dynasty carried within its blood a resonance with forces that history could not measure, a force that could shape destinies silently, imperceptibly, yet irrevocably. The idea of divine blood became central to their mystique. To the common people, the Merovingians were blessed or cursed, with a lineage that marked them as different. Their hair, often long and flowing, was not just a symbol of nobility. It was said to be a conduit of power, a physical manifestation of their connection to something greater. Some accounts suggested that cutting a Merovingian's hair could diminish their authority, while preserving it safeguarded their strength. While modern historians might dismiss such claims as superstition, in the context of the early medieval world, such beliefs carried immense weight. People acted according to what they feared and revered, and in that way, the legend of the Merovingian bloodline became a self-fulfilling reality, bolstering their rule through faith as much as through force. Clovis himself became the living embodiment of this duality, human yet seemingly touched by destiny. He was a fierce warrior, a shrewd tactician, and at times ruthlessly pragmatic. Yet the moment he embraced Christianity, converting from paganism to unite his kingdom under a single faith, a new layer of mystery emerged. His conversion was political, certainly, but some chroniclers hint that it was more than politics. There was a sense of inevitability, as though the course of his life, and the lives of his descendants, was guided by forces beyond human comprehension. The baptism of Clovis did not merely signal a change of faith. It marked the beginning of a legacy that would intertwine divine destiny, mortal ambition, and cryptic prophecy in ways that historians still struggle to untangle. The Merovingians' influence extended far beyond the battlefield or the royal court. Through marriage alliances, strategic placements of heirs, and careful cultivation of loyalty, they built a network of control that reached across territories and generations. Yet even as they amassed power, there were always shadows lurking nearby, rivals who envied their lineage, clergy who questioned their legitimacy, and distant observers who speculated about the dynasty's true intentions. In these tensions, the seeds of legend were sown. Tales of secret councils, hidden manuscripts, and prophecies circulated among the learned and the curious alike. To the public, these stories were cautionary tales. To insiders, they were warnings of power that demanded secrecy. The notion of a hidden prophecy attached to the Merovingian bloodline added another layer to their enigma. Unlike prophecies openly declared in public squares or written in sacred texts for all to read, this one was shrouded, deliberately fragmented, and preserved only in hushed whispers. Some claimed it foretold the fate of kings and empires. Others believed it revealed the potential for a ruler whose very bloodline could alter the course of European history. What made it terrifying was not merely its content, but the implication that knowledge of it could empower or destroy. Those entrusted with the secret were bound by fear, loyalty, or faith, ensuring that its truth remained locked away, passing through generations like a hidden flame flickering in the darkness. Yet the Merovingians were not immune to human failings. Behind the allure of divine blood and prophetic insight lay ambition, jealousy, and occasional cruelty. Betrayal ran through the family as much as loyalty did, and political machinations often threatened to unravel the very dynasty that was supposed to be predestined to rule. Heirs vanished mysteriously, alliances dissolved unexpectedly, and chroniclers' accounts frequently conflicted. Each fragment of history hinted at a more complex story, one where the outward trappings of kingship masked a world of secrets and shadowed dealings. The duality of the Merovingian legacy, the interplay of human agency and supposed destiny, became a fascination for historians and storytellers alike. Their reign demonstrated how perception could be wielded as power. If people believed a king was divinely favored, that belief itself became a weapon, strengthening the ruler's authority while sowing doubt and fear in the minds of opponents. In a world without mass communication, reputation traveled faster than armies. A whispered rumor could topple a rival. A gesture of mercy could forge lifelong allegiance. The Merovingians, knowingly or not, understood this principle, leveraging myth and mystique as much as law and warfare. By the middle of the 6th century, the dynasty had reached a point where legend and fact were inseparable. Stories of miraculous survival, extraordinary leadership, and uncanny foresight abounded. Chroniclers hinted at hidden texts, secret symbols, and ceremonial practices that promised insight into the fate of nations. Some of these accounts were undoubtedly embellished, yet recurring patterns suggest kernels of truth carefully preserved. Modern historians continue to debate the reliability of these records, but the aura of mystery remains undeniable. It is this blending of history and myth, fact and speculation, that gives the Merovingians their enduring intrigue. As Europe shifted under the pressures of new kingdoms, invasions, and religious transformations, the Merovingians' influence subtly evolved. Even when kings wielded less tangible power, their legend persisted, shaping perceptions and guiding decisions in ways that were rarely recorded. Symbols of their lineage appeared in architecture, art, and even religious ceremonies, small traces of a dynasty whose authority was no longer merely political but deeply cultural. Their presence, though sometimes invisible, continued to ripple through Europe like a silent, almost imperceptible current. It is in this context, a time of chaos, myth, and carefully guarded knowledge, that the true power of the Merovingians emerges. They were not just rulers. They were orchestrators of a narrative that spanned centuries, guardians of a bloodline imbued with significance, and holders of a secret that history itself seemed determined to conceal. Understanding their rise is not merely a matter of chronicling battles and successions. It is an invitation to peer into the hidden mechanisms of power, faith, and human fascination with the extraordinary. Even today, the question lingers: how could a family so seemingly ordinary hold such profound influence? How could whispers, legends, and shadows of prophecy persist long after kings had fallen and empires had changed? The answer may lie not just in what they did, but in what they concealed. The Merovingian story, with all its mystique, ambition, and mystery, serves as a doorway, a passage into Europe's silent secret, where bloodlines, destiny, and hidden knowledge intertwine in ways that continue to captivate and confound. And so, the legacy of the Merovingians is more than a historical footnote. It is a puzzle, a narrative carefully layered across time, daring anyone who listens closely to ask, what power lies hidden within a lineage that has long vanished from the public eye, yet whose shadow still stretches across the lands they once ruled? In the dim corridors of history, the earliest hints of the Merovingian prophecy emerge not as written declarations, but as whispers carried through monastic halls, secret councils, and the cautious words of chroniclers. There was no single text to declare it openly, no scroll boldly proclaiming the fate it foretold. Instead, the prophecy existed in fragments, coded passages within sacred manuscripts, subtle references in ceremonial rites, and oral traditions passed down from king to confidant, often under the veil of silence. Its very secrecy lent it an aura of power. What is forbidden or hidden, after all, is always more compelling than what lies in plain sight. Some scholars argue that the prophecy was a form of political insurance, designed to justify the Merovingians' claim to power in a turbulent age. Others suggest a deeper, almost mystical significance, hinting at a divine blueprint in which the dynasty's bloodline was meant to influence the destiny of Europe itself. In this light, the prophecy was more than prediction. It was a map of potential, a guide to choices that could alter history in ways the world was not yet ready to comprehend. For centuries, its very existence was doubted, questioned, or dismissed outright. Yet the more it was concealed, the more its shadow loomed over every generation of the dynasty. The origins of the prophecy are themselves shrouded in uncertainty. Some trace its whispers to the early Christian era, when pagan traditions and prophetic visions merged into a strange hybrid of faith and foresight. Others speculate that it predates Clovis, reaching back to the tribal leaders who first united the Frankish peoples under a single banner. Whatever its roots, by the 6th century it had become inseparable from the identity of the Merovingians. Every coronation, every marriage, every political maneuver was subtly colored by the belief that the prophecy might guide or judge the dynasty's actions. Those who guarded it understood that knowledge carried immense responsibility and danger. What made the prophecy so compelling and so feared was its ambiguity. Unlike many predictions that provide clear outcomes, this one was deliberately enigmatic. It spoke in riddles, using symbolism that could be interpreted in multiple ways, depending on perspective and circumstance. A passage could suggest triumph or disaster, loyalty or betrayal, depending on who read it and when. Some chroniclers hinted that the prophecy even contained coded warnings about external powers, enemies who would seek to erase the Merovingians, rivals who would attempt to manipulate their destiny, or forces within the church and state poised to rewrite history itself. In essence, the prophecy functioned as both guide and weapon, simultaneously a source of hope and a cause for dread. The method of its transmission added to its allure and secrecy. Oral tradition played a significant role, with kings and trusted advisors recounting select passages under strict conditions. Some texts were encoded in symbolic language, only understandable to those initiated into certain rituals or traditions. Others were hidden in objects, rings, crowns, or ceremonial regalia, their meaning invisible to the untrained eye. In this way, the prophecy existed not as a static document, but as a living, breathing presence within the dynasty, adapting, shifting, and concealing itself according to necessity. It was a secret that demanded guardianship, patience, and above all, discretion. The human element of the prophecy cannot be overstated. It was not merely the abstract words or symbols that gave it power. It was the way people responded to them. Kings, advisors, and scribes interpreted the prophecy according to their ambitions, fears, and desires. Some acted with caution, allowing the prophecy to guide strategy subtly and invisibly. Others exploited it to manipulate allies or intimidate rivals. And always, beneath these maneuvers, lingered the unspoken understanding that the prophecy was not simply a record of future events. It was a living, ethical force, a moral and political compass whose consequences could ripple through generations. Over time, the prophecy became a source of tension within the Merovingian court. There were factions who believed in it fervently, seeing it as a divine mandate that legitimized their rule and demanded absolute fidelity. Others dismissed it as superstition or feared its implications, worried that knowledge of it might provoke enemies or incite rebellion. These internal conflicts added layers of complexity to the dynasty's decisions, making each political act, each alliance, each betrayal more than a maneuver for power. They were moves on a board dictated in part by whispers of destiny. The prophecy's influence was not confined to politics alone. Religious rituals, ceremonies, and symbols were all imbued with its presence. Kings were baptized with an awareness of its guidance. Sacred objects were consecrated in ways that mirrored the instructions encoded in the prophecy. Even architecture and artistic commissions subtly referenced its hidden meanings, a visual language only the initiated could decode. In this sense, the prophecy became a quiet architect of culture, shaping not only who ruled but also how society perceived divinity, power, and the intersection of the two. Yet the prophecy was never fully deciphered. Centuries later, historians and scholars continue to grapple with its significance, combing through fragments of manuscripts, letters, and artifacts for clues. Each discovery raises more questions than answers. Was it purely symbolic, meant to inspire loyalty and fear? Did it truly encode knowledge of future events, a premonition of empires rising and falling? Or was it a deliberate invention, a story told by kings to consolidate power and obscure vulnerabilities? The uncertainty is precisely what has preserved its mystique, allowing the Merovingians to linger in collective imagination long after their political dominance faded. It is perhaps this combination of secrecy, human intrigue, and mysticism that makes the Merovingian prophecy endure as one of history's most tantalizing enigmas. Unlike many ancient texts, it does not lie dormant in a library or archive. It moves through time, carried in whispers, hidden symbols, and the unspoken knowledge of those who know, or think they know, how to interpret it. It challenges historians to question the boundaries between fact and legend, and it reminds us that history is not only shaped by what is recorded, but also by what is concealed. As we begin to trace the threads of this prophecy, it becomes clear that its significance is not merely historical. It is personal, political, and profoundly human. It is a story of power and fear, of hope and secrecy, and of a family whose destiny, real or imagined, continues to captivate imagination centuries later. The prophecy does not merely recount events. It compels action, shapes perception, and haunts the spaces between recorded history and legend. It is a shadow stretching across time, waiting for those brave enough to follow its hidden trail. And so, the question persists: what exactly did the prophecy foretell? Was it the rise and fall of kings, the fate of empires, or the influence of a secret bloodline guiding Europe silently from behind the veil of history? Or perhaps, more unnervingly, it is still active, its words lingering in forms we have yet to recognize, shaping events quietly from the shadows. In the quiet corners of medieval Europe, in the whispers of monks and nobles, in the hushed discussions of kings, the prophecy remained alive, an invisible force guiding the Merovingians as they navigated ambition, betrayal, and destiny itself. Clovis I, the first great Merovingian king, looms in history like a figure both monumental and enigmatic. His story is one of ambition, strategy, and faith, yet beneath the surface lies a web of intrigue and secrets that few have fully grasped. Born into a turbulent era, when tribal loyalties shifted like sand and the remnants of Roman authority crumbled, Clovis's rise was anything but inevitable. He was young, ambitious, and audacious, yet he carried within him a sense of destiny that seemed to guide his every move, a quiet force that whispered possibilities and warnings alike. As Clovis consolidated his rule over the Frankish tribes, his reputation grew rapidly. He was a brilliant tactician, capable of turning disparate forces into a disciplined army and forging alliances that others deemed impossible. Yet it was not only his military skill that set him apart. There was an uncanny quality to his presence, an ability to command loyalty with mere words, to inspire fear or admiration with gestures so subtle that even the most vigilant courtiers were unaware of their sway. Chroniclers of the time often noted that Clovis's eyes seemed to see beyond the immediate, to anticipate events before they unfolded, as though he were navigating the currents of fate itself. It was during this period of conquest and consolidation that Clovis's connection to the Merovingian prophecy became most apparent. Scholars have long debated the nature of this link. Some suggest that the prophecy, already whispered through generations, guided his decisions, offering a framework for his alliances, battles, and even domestic policies. Others argue that Clovis, aware of the prophecy's existence, used it to strengthen his authority, presenting himself as a divinely favored ruler whose actions were preordained. Either way, the shadow of the prophecy loomed over his reign, a silent presence shaping history while remaining hidden from the eyes of most. The most dramatic turning point in Clovis's life came with his conversion to Christianity. This moment, so pivotal that it is remembered centuries later, was not simply a political maneuver or a personal revelation. It was a statement with far-reaching consequences. By embracing the Christian faith, Clovis united his people under a single spiritual banner, creating cohesion and stability in a fractured land. But his conversion was also deeply symbolic. To contemporaries, it suggested that the Merovingians were chosen, set apart by divine will, and that their bloodline carried significance beyond mere rulership. It reinforced the notion that the prophecy was more than legend, it was intertwined with destiny itself. Yet, the baptism of Clovis was only the beginning of a complex interplay between faith and power. As he expanded his kingdom, he faced resistance from rival rulers, pagan chieftains, and even factions within his own court. Each challenge became a test not only of military prowess but of interpretation. How should the prophecy guide action? Which alliances honored the hidden path it suggested? Which enemies represented dangers foretold, and which were false distractions? The lines between political strategy, divine guidance, and personal ambition blurred, creating a landscape in which every decision carried profound stakes. The human side of Clovis is often overlooked. Behind the aura of destiny and the rigid structure of kingship was a man capable of fear, doubt, and intense emotion. He grieved for lost allies and mourned fallen soldiers, yet he could act with ruthless decisiveness when necessary. Betrayal was a constant companion, from disloyal nobles to rival kings who plotted in shadows. And yet, it was perhaps precisely these human flaws and virtues that made him an instrument of the prophecy. A ruler untouched by human struggle would be unreadable, predictable, and therefore ineffective. Clovis's humanity, entwined with his sense of destiny, created the tension that made his reign both remarkable and dangerous. One of the most intriguing aspects of Clovis's rule is the secrecy surrounding his inner circle. Certain advisors, clerics, and confidants were entrusted with knowledge that the broader court could not access. Some of these secrets involved interpretations of the prophecy, others concerned the preservation of the Merovingian bloodline and the survival of potential heirs. These confidants acted as guardians of knowledge, preserving texts, symbols, and oral instructions that would be passed from one generation to the next. The stakes were immense. A misplaced word, a misinterpreted sign, or a betrayal could unravel the carefully maintained legacy of a dynasty that sought not only survival but mastery over destiny itself. Clovis's marriage alliances further illustrate the interplay between political pragmatism and prophetic significance. Each union was calculated, not solely to secure territory or loyalty, but to maintain the integrity of the bloodline and, perhaps, to honor the hidden guidelines of the prophecy. Chroniclers occasionally hint at marriages that were arranged under clandestine advice, with negotiations and ceremonies laden with symbolism. Some alliances were fleeting, others enduring, but all carried layers of meaning, extending beyond mere diplomacy into the realm of destiny. Even his battles bear the imprint of foresight and strategy that seemed almost supernatural. From the decisive victory over the Alemanni to the confrontation with the Visigoths, Clovis exhibited an uncanny ability to anticipate enemy movements, exploit weaknesses, and adapt rapidly to shifting circumstances. Scholars have debated whether this skill was purely human genius or whether it was guided by deeper knowledge, the encoded wisdom of the prophecy subtly influencing each choice. The outcomes of these conflicts did more than expand territory. They reinforced the perception of the Merovingians as a divinely favored line, a family whose blood was intertwined with the fate of the continent. Religious institutions also played a critical role in Clovis's consolidation of power. Bishops, abbots, and clerics were not merely spiritual advisors but active participants in shaping the narrative of his reign. They helped translate the enigmatic whispers of the prophecy into actionable counsel, embedding it within ceremonies, decrees, and public rituals. These institutions became custodians of knowledge, ensuring that the dynasty's hidden potential was both protected and strategically deployed. The church's involvement also lent credibility to the dynasty's mystique, merging faith, politics, and legend into a seamless narrative that reinforced both authority and secrecy. Yet the story of Clovis is not only one of triumph and divine alignment. It is also a story of fragility and peril. The very secrecy that preserved the prophecy also created vulnerabilities. Misinterpretation, betrayal, and human error loomed constantly. Advisors could misread signs, enemies could exploit gaps in knowledge, and the dynasty itself could fracture under internal tension. Clovis's genius lay not only in his ability to expand his kingdom, but in his skillful navigation of these unseen currents, maintaining control while protecting the secret that could unravel all he had built. By the time of Clovis's death, the foundations of the Merovingian dynasty were solidified, yet the mysteries remained unresolved. The prophecy endured, guarded, interpreted, and sometimes feared. The long-haired kings who followed him inherited not only a kingdom but a responsibility of almost unimaginable weight, to uphold a destiny encoded in whispers and symbols, a destiny that demanded vigilance, intelligence, and courage. Each successor would confront the duality of their inheritance, a bloodline marked by power and a prophecy that could guide or destroy. The reign of Clovis demonstrates a central tension in the Merovingian narrative, the delicate balance between human ambition and the pull of destiny. His life illustrates how a ruler can navigate both the tangible and intangible, shaping history through decisions that are as much moral and philosophical as they are tactical. It is in this delicate interplay that the dynasty's enduring allure lies, in the intersection of legend, prophecy, and the human desire to leave a mark on the world. Clovis's story also raises profound questions for those who study the Merovingians centuries later. How much of their power was human skill, and how much was guided by forces hidden in prophecy? Was the dynasty's influence the result of divine favor, meticulous planning, or a combination of both? Perhaps the most haunting realization is that the answer may never be fully known. The prophecy, after all, was designed to remain elusive, to protect the dynasty and its secrets while allowing enough ambiguity to inspire awe, fear, and loyalty. And so, as we step into the world of Clovis I, we see a king whose life was more than conquest and rule. It was a careful dance along the lines of destiny, faith, and human ambition, a performance conducted under the watchful eyes of those who understood the weight of a hidden prophecy. Every decision, every alliance, every battle was a thread in a tapestry that stretched across time, shaping not only the Merovingians but the very course of European history. By understanding Clovis, we begin to glimpse the broader pattern that defines the dynasty. A family intertwined with prophecy, guarding secrets whose implications could stretch far beyond their own lives, influencing the rise and fall of kingdoms, and leaving behind a legacy that continues to intrigue, confound, and mystify even today. Even as Clovis secured his throne and expanded his kingdom, whispers of lost Merovingian heirs began to circulate, weaving an additional layer of intrigue around a dynasty already shrouded in mystery. These were not idle rumors. They were accounts of children hidden away, secret marriages conducted in silence, and offspring whose very existence threatened both political and spiritual stability. In an era when succession meant survival, the disappearance of an heir could change the fate of kingdoms, and for the Merovingians, it was as if the bloodline itself demanded both secrecy and protection. Stories of hidden heirs emerged in various forms. Chroniclers, often writing under the influence of rival courts or ecclesiastical censorship, included vague references to children who vanished without record. Some accounts suggested that these heirs were concealed in monasteries or remote villages, raised by loyalists sworn to protect the bloodline at any cost. Others hinted at exiles who grew up under assumed names, their true identities obscured from friend and foe alike. The purpose of such concealment was clear. In a world where power could be stolen through betrayal or conquest, hiding the lineage was a form of insurance, safeguarding the future of a dynasty whose destiny was intertwined with the Merovingian prophecy. Yet the secrecy surrounding these heirs was double-edged. On one hand, it ensured survival. On the other, it sowed distrust and paranoia. Kings and advisors were forced to navigate not only the visible threats of war and diplomacy, but also the invisible currents of hidden family members whose existence could undermine claims to the throne. Every marriage, every alliance, every declaration of succession had to be carefully considered against the potential of an undisclosed heir. Even today, historians speculate that many Merovingian rulers were never fully certain of their bloodline's purity, aware that the prophecy's guidance might depend upon a hidden branch of the family that no one could trace with certainty. One of the most compelling legends involves a child born to a Merovingian king whose mother's identity was deliberately concealed. According to whispers preserved in obscure chronicles, this child was spirited away at birth and entrusted to a network of loyal guardians. In later years, some claim that this hidden heir returned to influence political events, though no record confirms such a return. The ambiguity only enhances the allure of the story. A child raised in secrecy, untouched by the immediate pressures of court life, yet destined, according to the prophecy, to play a role in shaping the future of Europe. It is precisely this tension between absence and influence, invisibility and power, that imbues the Merovingian narrative with such enduring fascination. The idea of concealed heirs also intersected with marriage politics. Every union was carefully orchestrated, not only to secure alliances, but to ensure the continuity of a bloodline already threatened by loss, betrayal, or rival claims. Some marriages were veiled in secrecy, conducted in private chapels or hidden locations, away from prying eyes. Chroniclers occasionally hint at unions that produced children whose names were deliberately omitted from official records, a measure intended to protect the dynasty's secrets while maintaining plausible deniability. These hidden heirs, it seems, were more than mere insurance. They were living embodiments of the prophecy, their survival a silent thread linking past and future. The peril surrounding hidden heirs was not only political but existential. In an era when assassination, betrayal, and intrigue were constant companions, a child's life could be at risk simply for existing. Secret guardians, often monks or loyal knights, became the unsung heroes of the dynasty, dedicating their lives to preserving a lineage whose importance transcended personal survival. They acted with meticulous care, ensuring that knowledge of the heirs' identities was restricted to a trusted few. The tension between concealment and discovery became a defining characteristic of the Merovingians. The dynasty thrived in public glory while safeguarding secrets that, if revealed, could alter history. The mystery of these heirs also fueled speculation across Europe. Rival rulers and chroniclers debated the possibility of hidden Merovingians influencing events from the shadows. Could a child raised in secrecy later claim a throne? Could the prophecy itself hinge upon the survival of a single unknown heir? Such questions were rarely answered, leaving historians to piece together fragments from scattered texts, letters, and oral traditions. Even now, centuries later, the speculation continues, with theories ranging from plausible to fantastical. The allure lies not only in the mystery itself but in the potential truth hidden within it. A truth that, if uncovered, could challenge everything we understand about European history. Beyond politics, the stories of hidden heirs resonate on a human level. They speak of trust, sacrifice, and loyalty. Families entrusted their children to strangers. Warriors dedicated their lives to protection in silence. And kings made decisions balancing love, duty, and the imperatives of destiny. In these hidden lives, one sees a microcosm of the broader Merovingian tension, the collision of personal desire with the demands of history, the private and the public, secrecy and revelation. The dynasty's survival depended as much on these unseen actors as it did on the kings themselves, a hidden network operating in shadows, ensuring that destiny remained intact. It is this combination of secrecy, human drama, and prophetic significance that makes the story of hidden heirs so compelling. They are more than historical curiosities. They are living symbols of the dynasty's resilience, a testament to the lengths to which a family would go to protect its destiny. The uncertainty surrounding them, the knowledge that some heirs may have existed, and that their identities may still be lost to history, amplifies the sense of intrigue, allowing the Merovingians to persist in the imagination as both rulers and keepers of secrets too dangerous to reveal. Ultimately, the tale of hidden heirs underscores a central truth about the Merovingians. Their power was never merely political. It was intertwined with destiny, prophecy, and secrecy. Each child concealed, each union hidden, each whisper of a lost heir was a thread in a tapestry that stretched across centuries, connecting past, present, and future in ways that were carefully orchestrated, yet inherently unpredictable. The dynasty's influence, therefore, was not only visible in castles, battles, and coronations, but also in the invisible, silent lives that shaped the course of history from the shadows. And so, as we delve deeper into the Merovingian world, the hidden heirs remind us that what we see on the surface, crowns, armies, laws, is only part of the story. Beneath it lies a network of secrets, sacrifices, and subtle influences, a silent engine that drove a dynasty whose reach extended far beyond the eyes of ordinary men. The existence of these heirs, whether fully real or partly myth, ensures that the Merovingian prophecy is never entirely resolved, that history always retains its mystery, and that the dynasty's true power remains, even now, just out of reach, waiting to be discovered. The Merovingians' influence was not limited to bloodlines, battles, or political cunning. In the hidden corners of their realm, they safeguarded objects of immense significance, relics and artifacts whose very existence carried power, secrecy, and danger. These were not merely symbols of faith or status. They were instruments, keys to understanding the dynasty's connection to the prophecy, and in some accounts, channels through which hidden knowledge could manifest. From ancient manuscripts inscribed with cryptic symbols to sacred objects enshrined in private chapels, the Merovingians cultivated a tangible link to forces beyond ordinary perception. Among these relics, the most renowned and mysterious were those tied to the family's supposed divine heritage. Chroniclers whispered of crowns adorned with inscriptions no ordinary scholar could read, rings believed to confer insight into destiny, and ceremonial daggers preserved for generations, each with a history entwined in both triumph and betrayal. These objects were hidden with meticulous care, often divided among trusted guardians who understood the profound stakes. In the wrong hands, the relics could undo kingdoms, incite rebellion, or reveal the Merovingian prophecy itself. To possess one was not merely to hold a token. It was to wield responsibility, a dangerous mantle that few could survive. Some relics were explicitly religious, sanctified through the church yet imbued with secret significance. Others appeared mundane to outsiders. A jeweled chalice, a ceremonial sword, an ancient scroll, but their meaning was encoded in ways accessible only to those initiated into the family's inner circle. These artifacts often carried dual purposes. Public display reinforced legitimacy, while hidden knowledge safeguarded continuity and power. Monks, scribes, and loyal retainers became the quiet custodians, navigating a precarious balance between devotion, secrecy, and political survival. The loss of even a single relic could destabilize both perception and reality, creating ripples that might echo for decades. The sacred and the dangerous were not easily separated. A ceremonial object might inspire devotion in one era and incite rebellion in another. Some relics contained fragments of prophecy, passages that could alter interpretations of destiny if revealed prematurely. Others were rumored to possess qualities beyond the natural world, the ability to guide decision-making, to warn of betrayal, or even to bestow influence over those who wielded them wisely. Such claims blurred the line between faith, superstition, and genuine strategic advantage. To those within the dynasty, the artifacts were living extensions of power. To outsiders, they were mythic instruments whose effects could only be guessed. Perhaps the most famous of these objects were manuscripts, tomes whose pages held the most direct connection to the Merovingian prophecy. Written in cryptic scripts, often combining Latin with symbolic notation, they were nearly indecipherable without guidance from a trusted advisor. Some accounts suggest that the texts were deliberately fragmented, distributed among multiple custodians to prevent a single person from gaining full understanding. The process of interpretation was itself ritualized, requiring knowledge of both history and mystical practice. In this way, the manuscripts were not only repositories of hidden wisdom but tools of control, shaping the dynasty's actions and decisions across generations. The guardianship of these relics was fraught with peril. Rival families, ambitious nobles, and clerics with their own agendas constantly sought access. The Merovingians understood that knowledge, like power, could be lethal if mishandled. Stories survive of envoys poisoned for daring to examine certain manuscripts, of entire estates confiscated to protect objects from potential theft, and of secret chambers concealed behind false walls and under monastery floors. Each relic carried a dual life, one visible, one hidden, and both were crucial to the survival of the dynasty's secret. One particularly enigmatic account involves a ceremonial cup said to contain encoded references to the survival of hidden heirs. Chroniclers hinted that those who drank from it during sacred rituals could see the line of kings unfold before their eyes, a vision that guided political and religious decisions. Modern historians often dismiss these stories as legend, but even in the skepticism lies recognition of the object's symbolic potency. Whether literal or allegorical, such tales demonstrate how the Merovingians intertwined myth, politics, and prophecy to reinforce their authority and to maintain control over knowledge that might otherwise fracture their kingdom. Relics also served as instruments of negotiation and influence. To display one publicly was to signal legitimacy, divine favor, and authority. Ambassadors and rivals understood the subtle language of these objects. A carefully placed artifact could calm unrest, cement alliances, or intimidate adversaries. The Merovingians mastered this duality, the balance of secrecy and exposure, knowing when a relic should shine in ceremonial light and when it should remain shrouded in shadow. This careful calibration allowed the dynasty to maintain an aura of mystique that extended beyond politics into the cultural and spiritual imagination of Europe. The danger surrounding these sacred objects was ever present. During times of conflict, rival factions sought them not only to control kings but also to manipulate prophecy itself. Some were stolen, destroyed, or hidden in remote locations, their whereabouts lost to time. Yet even in concealment, the object's symbolic power persisted, influencing decisions and narratives as chroniclers recorded events with cautious reference to the dynasty's mystical tools. The careful orchestration of access, secrecy, and interpretation became a hallmark of Merovingian strategy, a testament to the dynasty's understanding that power was not simply in armies or land but in knowledge, faith, and the manipulation of perception. The interplay of relics and prophecy also reveals the human dimension of the dynasty. Guardians were often ordinary men and women who performed extraordinary acts of loyalty, risking their lives to preserve fragments of knowledge. These individuals understood that failure could mean not only the loss of an object but the unraveling of centuries of planning, secrecy, and destiny. Their sacrifices were silent, often unrecorded, yet their role was critical. Without their vigilance, the artifacts and the hidden truths they contained might have fallen into the wrong hands, forever altering the course of history. In some ways, the relics were extensions of the dynasty itself, tangible yet elusive, visible yet inscrutable, powerful yet dangerous. They connected the human and the mystical, the political and the prophetic, and in doing so, they preserved the Merovingians' aura of mystery long after their political influence began to wane. They were reminders that power is never merely material. It is also symbolic, ethical, and spiritual, a lesson that resonates as much in modern imagination as it did in medieval Europe. And so, the sacred objects of the Merovingians remain more than historical artifacts. They are conduits of intrigue, carriers of hidden knowledge, and symbols of a dynasty whose secrets spanned centuries. Each relic is a story in itself, a silent witness to power struggles, betrayals, and acts of courage that defined the dynasty's rise and survival. They remind us that the Merovingians' influence extended far beyond what is recorded in annals, into the unseen realms where faith, prophecy, and human ambition converge. As we examine these relics, it becomes clear that they were not merely trophies of power. They were instruments of survival, guardians of prophecy, and keys to understanding a dynasty whose secrets continue to haunt history. In the shadows of abbeys, castles, and hidden chambers, these sacred objects waited, their presence both protective and dangerous, silently shaping the course of kings, heirs, and the very destiny of Europe itself. Even as the Merovingians fortified their dynasty through bloodlines, prophecy, and sacred relics, the shadows of rivals loomed ever closer. Kings, dukes, and ambitious nobles across Europe were acutely aware of the Merovingians' power and mystique, and many sought to exploit, challenge, or destroy it. The dynasty's influence, whether through political control, religious symbolism, or secret knowledge, posed a threat to those who desired unchecked authority. The threat was not only immediate but persistent, a constant tension shaping decisions, alliances, and betrayals. The Merovingians thrived under this pressure, but the stakes were always high. One misstep could unravel centuries of careful planning. Rival factions often exploited uncertainty about succession and the hidden heirs. Ambitious nobles, eager to claim influence over the throne, whispered rumors and forged alliances with external forces. In some cases, they sought to expose the dynasty's secrets, using knowledge of the prophecy or hidden heirs to undermine the king's authority. These machinations created a political landscape where trust was fragile, loyalty uncertain, and every conversation could conceal a hidden agenda. Within the court, suspicion became a survival skill, and the Merovingians relied on a combination of intuition, counsel from trusted advisors, and, perhaps, subtle guidance from the prophecy itself to navigate these threats. Among the most insidious of rivals were rival dynasties, some descended from the remnants of Roman or Germanic aristocracy, who claimed historical or divine rights to territory. These families studied the Merovingians' moves with meticulous attention, noting their alliances, marriages, and even their ceremonial practices. Chroniclers hint that rival rulers sometimes employed spies within monasteries or courtly circles, seeking to uncover hidden heirs or gain insight into sacred relics. In such an environment, information was power, and deception was often more effective than force. The Merovingians' ability to protect secrets was as crucial as their military strength, and it is here that the dynasty's mystique became both shield and weapon. The church, too, played a complicated role in the shadow of rivals. While clerics often supported the Merovingians publicly, their loyalty was not always absolute. Bishops and abbots could use their spiritual authority to influence succession or challenge a king's decisions. In some cases, church officials colluded with rivals, either out of political ambition or genuine concern about the ethical implications of a prophecy that few could interpret fully. The relationship between secular and religious power was a delicate dance, and missteps could lead to excommunication, rebellion, or political isolation. The Merovingians, aware of these dynamics, cultivated alliances carefully, balancing the need for ecclesiastical approval with the necessity of secrecy. External threats amplified the tension. Neighboring kingdoms, such as the Visigoths, Alemanni, and Lombards, recognized the strategic importance of Merovingian territory and sought to destabilize the dynasty whenever possible. Invasion, diplomacy, and subterfuge were all tools employed against them. Some rivals attempted to manipulate public perception, spreading stories of the Merovingians' mysterious practices, their sacred relics, and the prophecy that guided them. To the common people, these tales could evoke fear or reverence. To political adversaries, they were instruments to undermine loyalty and challenge legitimacy. The dynasty's strength, in other words, relied as much on controlling narratives as it did on armies or wealth. Assassination and betrayal were constant risks. Court intrigues were frequent, and even trusted advisors could be bribed or coerced into revealing secrets. Chroniclers record instances of sudden deaths, suspicious accidents, and mysterious disappearances, all framed within a context where power was inseparable from danger. In this environment, the Merovingians relied on a network of loyal guardians and spies, often the same individuals who preserved the hidden heirs and sacred relics. Their vigilance ensured that rivals, no matter how cunning, could be anticipated and countered, preserving the dynasty's fragile stability. Yet rivalry was not always outwardly hostile. Some adversaries attempted to co-opt the dynasty through marriage alliances, adopting a strategy that appeared cooperative while hiding ulterior motives. These arrangements created a complex web of loyalties, blending trust and suspicion in equal measure. For the Merovingians, discernment was essential. A misjudged alliance could provide rivals with access to bloodlines or relics, while a well-calculated union could consolidate power, secure borders, and even protect the prophecy. The interplay between trust, deception, and foresight became a defining feature of the dynasty's survival strategy. The shadow of rivals also intersected with the hidden heirs. Every unknown descendant represented both a potential savior and a threat. Rivals who discovered the existence of these heirs could manipulate them, place them on the throne under controlled conditions, or eliminate them entirely. This knowledge added urgency to the Merovingians' protective measures. Guardians of the bloodline were constantly on alert, moving heirs between safe houses, remote monasteries, and loyal households. Each transfer carried the risk of exposure, and each act of concealment reinforced the dynasty's reliance on secrecy as much as on traditional power. Intrigue extended beyond the immediate boundaries of the kingdom. Diplomatic correspondences often contained coded warnings about rival ambitions, and envoys acted as both messengers and spies. Treaties were signed with one hand while hidden agreements and covert operations unfolded with the other. The Merovingians understood that political influence could be wielded as effectively through perception as through conquest. By cultivating an aura of divine favor and mystique, they created a psychological edge over their adversaries, ensuring that rivals were not merely challenged militarily, but constantly second-guessing the dynasty's next move. Despite these pressures, the Merovingians displayed remarkable resilience. Their ability to anticipate threats, safeguard knowledge, and manipulate perception allowed the dynasty to survive even in the face of concerted opposition. Rivals could plot, armies could march, and conspiracies could form, yet the dynasty endured. This endurance reinforced the aura of inevitability surrounding the Merovingians, the sense that their destiny was intertwined with forces beyond ordinary understanding. Rivals, no matter how cunning, were constrained by both the dynasty's strategic foresight and the mystique that shrouded its secrets. Ultimately, the shadow of rivals illuminates the duality of Merovingian power. On one hand, they wielded visible authority, armies, territories, religious legitimacy. On the other, they controlled invisible forces, prophecy, sacred relics, hidden heirs, and the careful management of perception. The tension between these spheres created a world in which every decision had profound consequences, and in which survival required both human skill and a deep understanding of the mystical and political currents at play. Rivals were a constant test, challenging the dynasty's resilience, cunning, and ability to navigate a treacherous landscape without compromising the secrets that defined their legacy. And so, the Merovingians thrived not in spite of rivals, but because of them. The pressure of opposition sharpened their strategies, honed their instincts, and reinforced the necessity of secrecy and foresight. In the shadow of those who sought to destroy them, the dynasty's power became not only political but psychological, spiritual, and prophetic, a multi-layered legacy that continues to fascinate and confound historians to this day. The story of the Merovingians is, at its core, a story of survival, cunning, and the delicate balance between revelation and concealment, and the shadow of rivals remains one of the most compelling forces shaping that legacy. Behind the grandeur of the Merovingian courts, behind the battles and the intrigue, there existed a network of individuals whose names rarely appear in the chronicles of history. The secret societies, monastic guardians, and clandestine orders devoted to protecting the dynasty's most closely held secrets. These groups were not merely servants or advisors. They were custodians of knowledge, guardians of prophecy, and protectors of sacred relics. Their existence was essential to the survival of the dynasty, for they operated in shadows, ensuring that no betrayal, espionage, or miscalculation could undermine the Merovingians' carefully constructed legacy. The monastic orders, in particular, played a pivotal role. Monks and clerics were entrusted with manuscripts containing fragments of the prophecy, records of hidden heirs, and coded instructions related to the dynasty's sacred artifacts. These manuscripts were never meant for public eyes. They were meant to guide, to warn, and to shape decisions from behind the curtain of secrecy. Many of these monks were not merely scholars of religion but experts in cryptography, history, and ceremonial practice. Their understanding of symbolism and coded language allowed them to interpret the prophecy and relay its guidance to kings and trusted advisors. They were both spiritual and practical agents, blending faith with vigilance in ways that few could comprehend. These guardians often operated in networks that spanned regions. A monastery in the north might coordinate with a hidden estate in the south, exchanging information through trusted messengers who were trained to travel in secrecy. Coded signals, hidden marks on manuscripts, and rituals performed at specific times all ensured that knowledge moved securely, imperceptible to those outside the network. To breach these networks was nearly impossible. The Merovingians designed them with layers of redundancy, secrecy, and loyalty that made infiltration a near-suicidal endeavor. It is through these invisible channels that the dynasty's most important directives, the safeguarding of relics, the protection of heirs, and the interpretation of prophecy, were executed across generations. Secret societies were not limited to religious institutions. Certain knightly orders and private councils acted as the physical enforcers of the dynasty's hidden will. These men were trained to act swiftly, silently, and decisively. Their role was to guard heirs, retrieve stolen artifacts, and eliminate threats before they could compromise the dynasty's continuity. Chroniclers occasionally mention sudden deaths or mysterious disappearances, events often attributed to divine will or political happenstance. In reality, many were likely the calculated interventions of these societies, acting in the shadows to maintain the balance of power. The rituals and oaths binding these guardians were rigorous and exacting. Loyalty was paramount. Betrayal was unthinkable, punishable not only by death, but by the potential exposure of knowledge that could unravel the dynasty itself. Guardians underwent years of training, learning to read hidden scripts, memorize sacred codes, and navigate treacherous political landscapes. Their discipline was such that even when the kings themselves faltered, these custodians maintained the integrity of the prophecy and the dynasty's sacred relics. In essence, they were the invisible backbone of the Merovingian world, their dedication ensuring that secrets remained secrets and that destiny, however cryptic, remained on course. The role of these guardians extended beyond protection. They were also interpreters of meaning. The prophecy, as cryptic and fragmented as it was, required careful and deliberate reading. A single misinterpretation could alter alliances, provoke conflict, or place a hidden heir at risk. Guardians, trained in both history and symbolism, would advise rulers and councils on the proper course of action, translating enigmatic passages into tangible decisions. In this way, the secret societies functioned as intermediaries between the abstract and the real, between fate and the decisions that would shape the future. Their influence was not always overt, but its impact was profound. Through their vigilance, the Merovingians were able to survive internal factionalism, rival dynasties, and foreign threats. Through their discretion, hidden heirs were protected, sacred relics were preserved, and the dynasty's mystique remained intact. Even today, traces of these networks survive in legend and lore, inspiring tales of secret brotherhoods and hidden orders whose knowledge shaped Europe from behind the scenes. While historians debate the extent of their influence, it is undeniable that without such guardians, the Merovingian legacy would have been far more vulnerable to the pressures of history. The relationship between kings and these secret custodians was complex. Monarchs relied on their discretion, yet they also had to contend with the independent judgment of guardians, who sometimes acted based on their understanding of prophecy rather than direct royal command. This dynamic created tension but also balance, as it prevented decisions driven purely by ambition or emotion from jeopardizing the dynasty's continuity. The most successful Merovingians were those who could respect the wisdom of these networks while exercising their own authority, maintaining harmony between human decision-making and the subtle guidance of prophecy. Some historians suggest that the influence of these societies extended beyond mere protection. They may have orchestrated strategic marriages, shaped public perception, and even influenced religious interpretations to align with the dynasty's long-term goals. In this sense, they were not passive custodians but active participants in the shaping of history, blending intelligence, intuition, and ritual practice to guide events in a manner consistent with the hidden blueprint of the Merovingian prophecy. The secrecy surrounding these networks also amplified the dynasty's aura of mystique. To outsiders, the Merovingians appeared as if guided by divine favor, blessed by forces unseen and protected by powers beyond ordinary understanding. This perception, whether entirely accurate or partially constructed, reinforced loyalty among subjects, intimidated rivals, and solidified the dynasty's cultural authority. The guardians, operating in shadows, ensured that this delicate balance of fear, respect, and secrecy remained unbroken. The human element in these societies is equally compelling. Guardians were not invulnerable, nor were they entirely detached from the world around them. They experienced fear, doubt, and moral conflict, yet their dedication to a cause larger than themselves, to the survival of a prophecy and a dynasty, compelled extraordinary courage. They sacrificed personal ambition, relationships, and even their lives to preserve secrets whose significance might never be publicly acknowledged. Their stories, largely unrecorded, are woven invisibly into the fabric of Merovingian history, their heroism silent but enduring. Ultimately, the secret societies and monastic guardians represent the unseen scaffolding of the Merovingian world. Without them, hidden heirs would have been lost, relics stolen or destroyed, and the prophecy misinterpreted or forgotten. Through their vigilance, skill, and loyalty, they allowed the dynasty to operate not merely as a political entity, but as a living embodiment of a secret destiny, whose threads stretch across time and whose influence continues to intrigue historians and mystery seekers alike. In examining these networks, we see a dynasty that understood the profound value of human intelligence, discretion, and ritualized knowledge. The Merovingians' power was not only in the lands they ruled or the armies they commanded, but in the invisible hands that protected and guided them. These guardians ensured that secrets remained safe, that knowledge was wielded wisely, and that the dynasty's legacy, both political and mystical, endured. It is through this lens that we can appreciate the true depth of the Merovingian story, a kingdom fortified not only by strength and strategy, but by networks of loyalty, wisdom, and unwavering devotion that operated entirely out of sight. Amid the layers of intrigue surrounding the Merovingians, one artifact stands out above all others: the Lost Codex. Scholars, chroniclers, and conspiracy theorists alike have debated its existence for centuries, yet all agree on one point: if it were ever found, it could illuminate the deepest secrets of the dynasty, its hidden heirs, and the prophecy that governed its destiny. Unlike ordinary manuscripts, the Lost Codex was said to contain not only historical records but coded instructions, symbolic illustrations, and cryptic guidance intended for generations of kings and guardians. Its very absence has fueled speculation, giving it an almost mythic status, a treasure sought by both devoted scholars and secretive power brokers. The Codex was rumored to be compiled over decades, perhaps even centuries, blending the accumulated knowledge of the dynasty's inner circle with esoteric wisdom drawn from Roman, Celtic, and early Christian traditions. Some of its pages were reportedly written in multiple languages, with layers of meaning accessible only to those initiated into the Merovingian secret network. Others contain diagrams, symbols, and geometric patterns that, according to surviving descriptions, seem to map out not merely lineage or territory, but a philosophical understanding of destiny itself. In this way, the Codex was more than a book. It was a multidimensional tool, both practical and mystical, bridging the human and the prophetic. Historians who reference the Lost Codex often describe its content as fragmented yet compelling. Chronicles mention passages that outline the protection of hidden heirs, instructions for safeguarding sacred relics, and methods for interpreting the prophecy across generations. Some interpretations suggest that the Codex contained warnings about rivals, detailing subtle strategies to anticipate betrayal and maintain power. Others imply it offered guidance on ritual practices, codifying ceremonies that reinforced both spiritual authority and political legitimacy. The level of sophistication attributed to the Codex implies that it was meant not for casual reading, but as a living guide, a blueprint for the dynasty's survival through turbulent times. The mystery surrounding the Codex is heightened by its disappearances and relocations. Historical accounts hint that it was moved frequently, hidden in monasteries, secret chambers, and even private estates. Some pages were allegedly removed or lost during periods of conflict, leaving the codex incomplete. Others were reportedly copied by trusted guardians, though those copies, like the originals, often vanished under suspicious circumstances. These movements were deliberate, designed to protect the codex from theft, destruction, or misinterpretation, but they also contributed to the enduring enigma: was the codex truly lost, or was it deliberately concealed to remain a secret even from future generations of Merovingians? The codex was not only a repository of knowledge but also a test of loyalty and understanding. Only those deemed worthy, kings, guardians, and select clerics, were allowed access to its contents. Each reader had to prove discernment, patience, and fidelity, for even a single misstep could result in catastrophe. Stories persist of advisors who were punished for misreading a symbol or revealing a secret too soon. In these accounts, the codex itself becomes a character, a silent arbiter of fate, granting insight to the deserving while punishing the reckless. Its presence infused the Merovingian world with tension, as each decision, battle, and alliance was potentially guided by the hidden knowledge it contained. One of the most tantalizing aspects of the codex involves its cryptic references to hidden heirs. While ordinary genealogical records merely noted births and deaths, the codex purportedly included detailed instructions on the protection, education, and strategic positioning of descendants whose existence could shift the balance of power. It suggested methods for obscuring identities, manipulating public perception, and navigating the dangers posed by rival dynasties. In effect, the codex was not only a historical record but a living guide, a manual for ensuring the survival of a bloodline whose destiny was intertwined with prophecy. The codex's influence extended beyond the Merovingian court. Rival factions, aware of its existence, sought its secrets, believing that possession could confer strategic advantage or even control over the dynasty itself. Attempts to locate or steal the codex were fraught with peril. Chroniclers recount stories of envoys disappearing, estates mysteriously burned, and entire libraries sealed off to protect the manuscript. These events enhanced the codex's mystique, transforming it from a repository of knowledge into a symbol of power, fear, and ultimate authority. In the eyes of contemporaries, to find the codex was to touch destiny itself. Yet the codex was more than a guide for rulers. It was a philosophical and spiritual text. Its pages reportedly contained reflections on fate, human nature, and the cyclical patterns of history, suggesting that the Merovingians viewed themselves as part of a larger cosmic design. Some scholars interpret this as an early attempt to reconcile faith with governance, to merge spiritual insight with practical rulership. Others see it as evidence that the dynasty's power was not merely political but metaphysical, a manifestation of a lineage that believed itself chosen to safeguard knowledge and guide Europe's destiny. Whether practical, symbolic, or mystical, the codex embodies the duality at the heart of the Merovingian legacy. The tension between secrecy and revelation, between human ambition and the shaping hand of prophecy. The search for the codex continues to this day, inspiring historians, treasure hunters, and conspiracy theorists alike. Fragments and references appear sporadically in libraries, archives, and obscure manuscripts, but no complete version has ever been confirmed. The allure lies not only in what the codex might reveal but in the very act of seeking it. The pursuit itself becomes a journey into the unknown, mirroring the careful, hidden operations that defined the dynasty for centuries. Every new discovery, every subtle clue, carries the weight of possibility. A single revelation could alter our understanding of the Merovingians, the hidden heirs, and the prophetic knowledge that guided them. In this sense, the Lost Codex embodies the central tension of the Merovingian story. It is both real and imagined, historical and legendary, a physical object and a conceptual idea. It represents the dynasty's mastery of secrecy, the careful orchestration of knowledge, and the constant interplay between visibility and concealment. It is a reminder that the most significant power often lies not in what is seen, but in what is hidden, interpreted, and preserved. The codex remains, in essence, a mirror of the dynasty itself, enigmatic, elusive, and profoundly influential, shaping history from the shadows even as it evades discovery. As we contemplate the lost codex, we are confronted with the enduring mystery at the heart of the Merovingian legacy. What knowledge did it contain? Which secrets remain buried within its pages? And perhaps most compellingly, who holds the true key to understanding its guidance? The codex is more than a relic. It is a symbol of the dynasty's enduring power, a testament to the ingenuity, foresight, and subtlety that allowed the Merovingians to endure through centuries of conflict, intrigue, and change. Its legend, much like the prophecy it preserves, continues to captivate, challenge, and inspire those who dare to seek the hidden truths of history. The Merovingians understood that power was not only exercised through armies, land, or wealth. It was also enacted through ritual, ceremony, and the deliberate performance of symbols that reinforced legitimacy, destiny, and divine favor. These were not ordinary public events or simple courtly displays. They were carefully orchestrated rituals designed to bind the dynasty, its heirs, and even its subjects to the invisible currents of prophecy. In every gesture, in every chant, in every sacred act, the Merovingians sought to manifest the will of destiny and secure the continuity of a lineage believed to be chosen by forces beyond human comprehension. The most iconic of these ceremonies was the coronation, a ritual infused with layers of meaning and secrecy. Unlike later European traditions, Merovingian coronations were not simply public spectacles. They were spiritual enactments, blending Christian rites with older, pre-Christian symbols of kingship. Kings were anointed with sacred oils, sometimes mixed with substances whose origins were deliberately hidden, each ingredient carrying symbolic significance. The ritual invoked not only divine blessing but also the authority of ancestors, the guardianship of hidden heirs, and the subtle guidance of prophecy. Those present, from bishops to loyal nobles, were themselves participants in a choreography designed to reinforce loyalty and awe, ensuring that the king's power was both visible and spiritually sanctioned. Within these ceremonies, the presence of sacred relics was crucial. The lost codex, ceremonial cups, jeweled crowns, and other objects were integrated into the ritual sequence, each serving as a physical conduit for metaphysical influence. Monks and guardians positioned these relics deliberately, often following precise instructions encoded in manuscripts that only a select few could interpret. Their placement was not accidental. Each object carried symbolic weight, representing the intertwining of human authority, divine favor, and prophetic destiny. To misplace a relic, to alter a gesture, or to perform a ritual incorrectly was to risk disrupting the invisible threads that sustained both legitimacy and continuity. Beyond coronation, the Merovingians employed rituals to mark critical transitions in the dynasty. Births of heirs, marriages, and even deaths were occasions for ceremonial enactment, blending secrecy and spectacle. Hidden heirs might be presented symbolically through veiled gestures, tokens, or inscriptions, signaling their presence to those who knew how to interpret them while leaving outsiders unaware. Marriages were often accompanied by rites that combined legal, spiritual, and prophetic elements, reinforcing alliances while embedding the event within the broader trajectory of destiny. Deaths, too, were ritualized, with funerary practices designed to protect knowledge, honor lineage, and preserve the aura of mystique surrounding the dynasty. One of the most fascinating aspects of these ceremonies was their coded nature. To the uninitiated, many acts appeared purely symbolic or even arcane. To those trained in interpretation, every movement, phrase, and object conveyed meaning. These codes allowed the Merovingians to communicate hidden knowledge, safeguard heirs, and transmit prophetic guidance without revealing secrets to rivals or the public. In essence, the rituals were a language of power, a silent dialogue between the dynasty, its guardians, and the unseen forces of destiny. Every gesture had purpose, and every audience member, knowingly or unknowingly, played a role in sustaining the dynasty's authority. Rituals also served to instill psychological influence. Spectators, whether nobles, clergy, or commoners, were subjected to a choreography that reinforced loyalty, awe, and fear. The grandeur of ceremonial dress, the precise cadence of chants, and the careful placement of relics all created an impression of divine ordination. Power became not only something enforced through law or sword but something experienced, felt, and internalized. In this way, ceremonies were instruments of governance, manipulating perception and belief to consolidate control without recourse to coercion. Guardians and secret societies played essential roles in ensuring that rituals were performed correctly. Mistakes could compromise not only the ceremonial sequence but also the dynasty's access to the guidance of prophecy. Monks, knights, and advisors meticulously rehearsed their duties, memorized sacred chants, and safeguarded ceremonial objects. These preparations were not only practical but spiritual, reinforcing the network of loyalty and secrecy that surrounded the Merovingians. Through these networks, ritual became a living practice, a continuous, disciplined performance that linked past, present, and future. Some rituals were deliberately obscure, designed to protect sensitive knowledge. Certain ceremonies took place in private chapels, behind locked doors, or at secret locations known only to trusted guardians. The meaning of the rites was encoded in gestures, chants, and the arrangement of sacred objects, creating a multi-layered system of communication. Outsiders, no matter how observant, could witness only the surface, unaware of the hidden dynamics that shaped power, prophecy, and succession. In this way, the Merovingians transformed ritual into a tool of secrecy as well as authority, a mechanism for shaping history invisibly. The ceremonial management of sacred relics, hidden heirs, and coded manuscripts further underscores the dynasty's sophisticated understanding of human psychology. Rituals reinforced belief, loyalty, and obedience, shaping both perception and action. For hidden heirs, ceremonial exposure, even symbolic, connected them to the broader lineage, instilling a sense of destiny and responsibility. For guardians, ritual performance validated their role, reaffirming loyalty and vigilance. For rivals, the spectacle suggested a power greater than brute force, a dynasty whose influence extended into realms unseen and almost incomprehensible. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect of these rituals is their adaptability. While some elements remained constant, others shifted to meet the needs of the moment, responding to political pressure, rival threats, or the interpretation of prophecy. This flexibility allowed the Merovingians to maintain continuity while navigating uncertainty, blending stability and innovation in a practice that was at once rigid and dynamic. Ritual, in this sense, was not a static tradition but a living strategy, continuously reinforcing the dynasty's legitimacy, protecting its secrets, and ensuring its survival across generations. Ultimately, the Merovingian ceremonies were not merely performative. They were a manifestation of the dynasty's philosophy and strategy. Through ritual, they merged human action with prophetic guidance, blending visible authority with hidden knowledge, and creating a world in which power was inseparable from perception, secrecy, and destiny. Every crown placed, every relic displayed, and every chant intoned contributed to a web of meaning that reinforced the dynasty's control over both events and narrative. These rituals ensured that even in times of uncertainty, the dynasty remained anchored to its prophetic trajectory, its heirs connected to their destiny, and its secrets carefully safeguarded. In contemplating these ceremonies, we recognize a profound truth. The Merovingians understood that the most enduring power is not merely political or military but symbolic, spiritual, and psychological. By orchestrating rituals that combined spectacle, secrecy, and sacred knowledge, they transformed their rule into an immersive experience, binding the dynasty, its subjects, and even its rivals to a vision of destiny that was both awe-inspiring and inescapable. The ceremonies were living evidence of the dynasty's mastery of both the seen and the unseen, the human and the mystical, the immediate and the eternal. Through these rituals, the Merovingians did not merely govern. They choreographed history itself, embedding meaning into every gesture, decision, and object, ensuring that the dynasty's power endured far beyond the reach of armies, laws, or fleeting politics. Their legacy is a testament to the subtle, almost invisible forces that shape destiny, a reminder that in the world of the Merovingians, the boundary between history, prophecy, and ritual was fluid, and that true power often resides in the mastery of symbols as much as in the exercise of authority. Long before the Merovingians fully understood the extent of their destiny, signs and omens began to shape the perception of their reign. These were subtle occurrences, strange celestial alignments, unusual weather patterns, sudden animal behavior, and prophetic visions interpreted by seers and monks that contemporaries believed to be messages from the divine. For the dynasty, such omens were more than superstition. They were guidance, warnings, or affirmations, interwoven with the cryptic messages contained in sacred relics and the lost codex. Every unexpected storm, comet, or eclipse could carry significance, interpreted carefully by the guardians and advisors entrusted with reading the hidden language of fate. The Merovingians, aware of the power of perception, treated these omens with a combination of reverence and calculation. Chronicles record that certain eclipses coincided with the births of heirs, suggesting divine approval of the bloodline. Sudden floods, plagues, or natural disasters were often seen as admonitions, prompting rapid adjustments in policy, alliances, or ritual practice. Monks trained in both astronomy and theology meticulously recorded these events, preserving them in manuscripts alongside coded interpretations. Their task was to discern patterns that others could not, translating seemingly random occurrences into strategic guidance that would protect the dynasty and its secrets. Some signs were symbolic, embedded within ordinary events yet interpreted with extraordinary insight. For instance, a flock of birds appearing in unusual formations during a royal procession might be read as a warning of betrayal, prompting increased vigilance among guardians and advisors. A sudden illness in a distant region could be seen as an omen of impending conflict, influencing diplomatic decisions. Even the discovery of certain rare herbs or minerals in the forests of Merovingian lands was occasionally interpreted as prophetic, their qualities considered markers of fortune or misfortune. In this way, the natural world became a canvas on which destiny painted itself, accessible only to those trained in the language of signs. Astrological observation was another critical dimension of the Merovingian understanding of omens. Kings and their counselors consulted celestial charts to anticipate events, aligning major decisions, marriages, battles, or ceremonies, with auspicious configurations of stars and planets. Astrology was not practiced for entertainment. It was a practical, strategic tool, a means of reading the invisible currents of fate that shaped Europe. The dynasty's astrologers worked closely with guardians of the codex and sacred relics, ensuring that both celestial and terrestrial guidance informed decisions, reinforcing the idea that the Merovingians' authority was not merely political but cosmically sanctioned. Religious visions and prophetic dreams also contributed to the unfolding of the Merovingian prophecy. Monks, seers, and occasionally members of the royal family reported visions that were carefully documented and interpreted. These experiences often contained layers of meaning, offering guidance on succession, the protection of heirs, or the timing of critical political moves. In some cases, the visions corroborated information in sacred manuscripts, providing a form of validation that reinforced the dynasty's sense of destiny. Yet visions were never taken at face value. Each was analyzed, cross-referenced, and tested against other signs to avoid misinterpretation that could jeopardize survival. The perception of omens served another purpose. It shaped the behavior of rivals and subjects alike. Tales of the Merovingians' ability to read signs and predict events circulated widely, enhancing the dynasty's mystique. Rivals, uncertain whether certain occurrences were coincidental or strategically interpreted, often hesitated or acted cautiously, giving the Merovingians an advantage in both diplomacy and conflict. Among the common people, the display of attentiveness to omens reinforced loyalty and awe. Subjects believed that the kings were not merely rulers but chosen interpreters of destiny, capable of reading the hidden language of the world itself. Even minor occurrences were scrutinized with care. A candle that flickered during a ceremonial rite, a raven perched near a castle tower, or a sudden gust of wind during an important negotiation could all carry significance when interpreted through the lens of prophecy. Chroniclers often emphasized these moments, not merely as narrative embellishment, but as documentation of the dynasty's attentiveness to signs. For the Merovingians, failure to observe or heed an omen could have dire consequences, potentially exposing hidden heirs, misaligning ceremonial rituals, or leaving sacred relics vulnerable. The interaction between omens and human action created a delicate dance of interpretation and decision. Guardians, advisors, and kings had to navigate the tension between superstition and strategy, between fear and opportunity. An eclipse, for instance, could be read as a warning of enemy betrayal or a signal of opportunity to strike decisively against rivals. The interpretation required intelligence, intuition, and knowledge of history and prophecy. By correctly reading signs, the Merovingians maintained their advantage, turning the uncertainties of the world into instruments of survival. Some omens were deliberately sought, not merely observed. Divination practices, scrying, and ceremonial consultation of sacred relics allowed the dynasty to anticipate challenges and plan responses. These rituals, carefully documented and performed, reinforced the inseparable link between prophecy, sacred objects, and human action. In this way, omens were both passive and active forces. They emerged naturally in the world, yet the dynasty also engaged with them deliberately, amplifying their significance and ensuring that destiny unfolded according to a careful, guided plan. Rivals, too, sometimes tried to exploit omens, attempting to manipulate perception or spread false readings. In these cases, guardians and advisors had to separate truth from deception, discerning which signs were genuine and which were crafted to mislead. This interplay added another layer of complexity to the Merovingian world. The dynasty was not merely reacting to nature or the heavens, but actively interpreting a dynamic web of information, constantly filtering reality from misdirection. This skill, the ability to read hidden meaning and anticipate consequences, became a hallmark of Merovingian survival and a key factor in their enduring mystique. The human dimension of responding to omens was profound. Kings and heirs experienced both awe and fear, knowing that the destiny of their lineage might hinge on interpreting the world correctly. Guardians bore the weight of translating subtle cues into practical action, aware that misjudgment could endanger lives, compromise secrets, or undermine the dynasty's authority. Every decision, every interpretation carried stakes that transcended the immediate moment, linking the present to the past and future in a continuous thread of cause and effect. Ultimately, the signs and omens that shaped Merovingian decisions reveal the dynasty's sophisticated understanding of the interplay between perception, prophecy, and power. They understood that destiny was not merely a written decree or a mystical concept, but a living force that could be read, interpreted, and influenced. The careful observation of celestial, natural, and spiritual signals allowed the dynasty to navigate a world full of uncertainty, maintaining the continuity of hidden heirs, sacred relics, and the guiding threads of prophecy. In reflecting on the role of omens, we see the Merovingians as masters of both the visible and invisible realms. They were warriors, kings, and statesmen, but they were also interpreters of the subtle, unseen patterns that shaped their world. Every eclipse, comet, storm, or vision was a note in a complex symphony of destiny, guiding their actions and influencing history in ways that remain difficult to fully comprehend. The Merovingians' ability to read and respond to these signs ensured that their dynasty endured, their secrets were preserved, and their prophecy continued to unfold, layer by enigmatic layer, through time. For centuries, the Merovingian dynasty had thrived in part because of what the world could not see. The hidden heirs, children born into secrecy, protected and nurtured far from the gaze of rivals and political opportunists. These heirs were the living embodiment of prophecy, each one carrying the weight of destiny and the future of the dynasty within their very blood. Their existence was a tightly held secret, known only to the guardians, monastic orders, and a select few advisors entrusted with their care. To reveal an heir prematurely was to invite danger, from ambitious nobles, rival dynasties, or even the church, whose influence could be both protective and threatening depending on interpretation. The birth of a hidden heir was never a simple matter. Monks and guardians often prepared remote sanctuaries, isolated estates, or secret convents where the child could be safely delivered and raised. Midwives and caretakers were carefully chosen, loyal to the dynasty above all else, and trained to follow strict protocols for secrecy. Some accounts suggest that children were moved frequently, sometimes under the cover of night, to ensure that no rival could track their movements. Every aspect of their upbringing was meticulously controlled: education, spiritual instruction, even knowledge of their own lineage, designed to prepare them for a life in which destiny, duty, and discretion were inseparable. The emergence of these heirs into the broader political sphere was as calculated as their concealment. Only when the dynasty was secure, or when the heir's revelation could serve a strategic purpose, were they introduced to the court or public life. These moments were fraught with tension. The appearance of a hidden heir could solidify alliances, deter rivals, or inspire loyalty among subjects, but it could also provoke suspicion, jealousy, and outright hostility. The guardians played a crucial role, advising the king or regent on the timing, location, and method of introduction. A single misstep could compromise not only the heir's safety but the continuity of the dynasty itself. Rivals were ever vigilant, and the discovery of an heir could shift the balance of power in an instant. Chronicles recount instances where families sought to intercept or even eliminate secret descendants, hoping to destabilize the Merovingians or seize control of succession. Guardians responded with precision and foresight, deploying intricate networks of safe houses, coded communication, and loyal intermediaries to protect the bloodline. The hidden heirs, often unaware of the full scope of danger surrounding them, grew up in an environment of calculated secrecy, learning early that trust was rare and vigilance essential. The psychological impact on these heirs was profound. To carry a legacy without knowing its full extent was both a burden and a gift. Some were trained in isolation, their education focused on history, strategy, and the prophetic knowledge that would one day guide them. Others were introduced to a select circle of mentors, individuals who conveyed the importance of loyalty, discretion, and destiny in ways both subtle and overt. The tension between ordinary childhood experience and the weight of secret purpose created individuals uniquely attuned to both human emotion and the intricacies of political survival. The revelation of hidden heirs often coincided with moments of crisis or opportunity. A rival threat, a political vacuum, or the emergence of a prophetic sign could prompt the dynasty to reveal the heir to consolidate power or inspire confidence. These introductions were carefully staged, blending ceremonial ritual with symbolic acts that reinforced legitimacy. Observers might see a simple display of lineage, a coronation, or an oath-taking ceremony, yet behind the visible act lay layers of meaning: the confirmation of prophecy, the preservation of sacred knowledge, and the reinforcement of loyalty across the dynasty. The existence of hidden heirs also influenced internal dynamics within the dynasty. Kings, regents, and advisors had to navigate the delicate balance between protecting these children and managing the ambitions of those already in positions of power. Succession disputes were a constant concern, and the guardian's guidance was crucial in ensuring that power transitions did not destabilize the realm. These dynamics created an atmosphere of tension and intrigue, as even the most trusted nobles could be tempted by the prospect of controlling or exploiting an undiscovered heir. The stakes were immense. The safety of the heir, the integrity of prophecy, and the future of the dynasty all depended on careful management of secrecy and revelation. The religious dimension of revealing heirs added further complexity. The church could serve as protector or adversary, and the timing of public acknowledgement often required delicate negotiation with bishops and abbots. Sacred relics and ceremonial acts were employed to signal divine approval of the heir's status, reinforcing both spiritual and political legitimacy. Monks and guardians advised on the interpretation of prophetic texts to ensure that the revelation aligned with established guidance, preventing rivals from challenging the heir's right to succession or undermining confidence among subjects. In this way, revelation was not a simple announcement but a strategic, ritualized act designed to safeguard both destiny and authority. Some hidden heirs were groomed for very specific roles, whether as future kings, advisors, or protectors of sacred relics. Their education often included lessons in diplomacy, cryptography, ritual performance, and martial skill, blending the practical with the mystical. They learned to read signs and omens, interpret prophetic texts, and navigate the treacherous waters of court intrigue. By the time they assumed public roles, these heirs were prepared not only to govern, but to protect the secrets and legacy of the dynasty, embodying both human authority and the metaphysical guidance of prophecy. The emergence of a hidden heir could provoke both awe and fear. Rivals, recognizing the potential threat, might accelerate plots, form alliances, or attempt to manipulate the situation to their advantage. Loyalists, on the other hand, were inspired to reaffirm their allegiance, viewing the heir as the living embodiment of continuity and destiny. Chroniclers often describe these moments with heightened drama, emphasizing the tension, suspense, and profound emotional impact of the revelation. Each introduction was a high-stakes event, capable of altering alliances, inspiring devotion, or inciting conflict. Throughout history, some hidden heirs remained concealed indefinitely, their existence only revealed centuries later through genealogical research, cryptic manuscripts, or oral tradition. Others rose to prominence in moments of crisis, fulfilling roles that seemed preordained by prophecy. In every case, the careful orchestration of secrecy, education, and ceremonial introduction ensured that the dynasty's legacy endured. The interplay between concealment and revelation, risk and strategy, human decision-making and prophetic guidance defines one of the most compelling aspects of Merovingian history. The hidden heirs were not simply individuals, but vessels of destiny, central to the survival and mystique of the dynasty. Ultimately, the story of the hidden heirs reveals the extraordinary lengths to which the Merovingians went to protect their bloodline, their secrets, and their prophetic mandate. It underscores the interplay between secrecy and revelation, human ambition and mystical guidance, and the delicate balance required to preserve a dynasty whose survival depended on both cunning and faith. These heirs were the living threads connecting past, present, and future, embodying the promise, danger, and mystery of a lineage that continues to fascinate and confound historians to this day. As the Merovingians navigated the intricate web of prophecy, hidden heirs, and ritualized power, they faced threats that were just as insidious as the invisible currents guiding their destiny. Rival kings, ambitious nobles, and foreign powers, all lurking in the shadows, waiting for the slightest weakness to exploit. These adversaries were not merely political opponents. They were forces attuned to opportunity, adept at reading signs, manipulating alliances, and undermining authority. The dynasty's guardians understood that the most dangerous enemies were often those closest to the throne, men and women who outwardly pledged loyalty but secretly coveted influence or the elimination of potential heirs. Rival kings, particularly in the fractured kingdoms of early medieval Europe, recognized the symbolic power of the Merovingian lineage. The dynasty's mystique, born of prophecy, secret heirs, and sacred relics, made them both feared and envied. To challenge a Merovingian king was not merely an act of political aggression. It was an attempt to wrest control over history itself. Some sought to expose hidden heirs, destabilize succession, or seize sacred artifacts that reinforced legitimacy. Others relied on intrigue, spreading false rumors, forging alliances with dissatisfied nobles, or even bribing members of the dynasty's inner circle to betray them. Every action had to be anticipated and countered, requiring vigilance, intelligence, and often ruthless decisiveness. The shadow of conspiracy extended into the royal court itself. Advisors and courtiers were not always what they seemed. Loyalty could be a facade, concealing ambition and subterfuge. Historical chronicles recount whispered plots, secret meetings in cloistered chambers, and coded messages exchanged between factions seeking to destabilize the Merovingian king. In some cases, these conspiracies were exposed and crushed before they could manifest. In others, they unfolded in tragic and dramatic fashion, leading to imprisonment, exile, or even assassination. The guardian's role was crucial. By monitoring alliances, interpreting omens, and decoding subtle signals, they acted as the dynasty's first line of defense against internal treachery. The stakes were particularly high when it came to hidden heirs. Rival kings and ambitious nobles understood that the discovery or elimination of a secret descendant could shift the balance of power across Europe. Guardians employed extraordinary measures to protect these heirs. Secret relocation, coded communication, and layered protection through loyal intermediaries. In some cases, heirs were disguised, raised under false identities, or even sent abroad to ensure their survival. These strategies, while effective, created a constant tension between concealment and necessity, as revealing an heir too early or too late could have catastrophic consequences. Foreign powers, too, sought to exploit the dynasty's vulnerabilities. Neighboring kingdoms, aware of the Merovingians' sacred relics and prophetic guidance, often attempted to destabilize the realm through diplomacy, marriage alliances, or outright military aggression. Chronicles describe sieges and skirmishes that, on the surface, appeared motivated by territorial ambition but were often influenced by the desire to seize artifacts or heirs that would confer legitimacy. In response, the dynasty's guardians coordinated intelligence networks, intercepting messengers, employing spies, and interpreting signs to anticipate threats. Their vigilance ensured that rivals, while formidable, could never fully undermine the dynasty's stability. Assassination plots were a persistent concern. Some accounts suggest that rival kings employed hired killers, mercenary bands, or insiders to strike at key figures within the dynasty. The sudden deaths of advisors or minor heirs were sometimes interpreted as divine will, yet the truth was often far more calculated. Guardians maintained vigilance through a combination of surveillance, coded alerts, and strategic placement of loyal agents. Their efforts created a precarious balance. The dynasty survived, but only through constant attention, intelligence, and the ability to act decisively at the first sign of threat. Conspiracies were not merely reactive. Some rival kings sought to actively manipulate prophecy itself. By interpreting signs, celestial events, and manuscripts in their own favor, they attempted to cast doubt on the Merovingians' legitimacy. In some cases, these rival interpretations were sophisticated, blending partial truth with deliberate deception to confuse allies and sow discord. The dynasty's guardians, trained in cryptography, history, and symbolic interpretation, were tasked with disentangling fact from fabrication, ensuring that the dynasty's actions remained aligned with the authentic guidance of prophecy. The court itself became a stage of psychological warfare. Advisors, courtiers, and foreign emissaries employed rhetoric, rumor, and subtle intimidation to shift perception, influence decisions, or provoke mistakes. Every conversation, banquet, and council meeting carried layers of meaning, requiring the king and his guardians to maintain constant awareness. Misjudgment could result in the exposure of a hidden heir, the loss of a sacred relic, or a strategic misstep that could empower rivals. The tension was relentless, creating an environment in which trust was rare, alliances fragile, and every decision fraught with consequence. Religious authority added another layer to the web of conspiracy. Bishops and abbots, while often allies, could also be political actors with their own agendas. Some sought to leverage prophecy, relics, or hidden heirs to strengthen their influence, aligning with rivals when it suited their interests. Negotiating these dynamics required subtlety, diplomacy, and occasionally, decisive action to neutralize threats without provoking scandal or rebellion. The Merovingian survival depended on understanding these complex networks of loyalty and ambition, ensuring that rivals could not exploit divisions within both secular and spiritual spheres. Historical records suggest that the dynasty's resilience in the face of conspiracy was extraordinary. Guardians, monks, and advisors operated in coordinated networks, sharing intelligence, interpreting omens, and orchestrating interventions to protect both heirs and sacred knowledge. Battles of strategy unfolded not only on fields but in council chambers, monasteries, and secret corridors. Rivals who underestimated the Merovingians' awareness often found themselves thwarted, while subtle interventions ensured that destiny remained on the intended path. In this sense, conspiracy was both a threat and a catalyst, sharpening the dynasty's vigilance and demonstrating the value of disciplined secrecy. The tension between visible power and hidden maneuvering defines this period of Merovingian history. While armies, fortresses, and legal authority projected strength outwardly, the unseen struggles behind the throne, rivalries, conspiracies, and hidden heirs, determined the dynasty's fate in profound ways. Every political decision was influenced by a calculus of risk and prophecy, each choice weighed against both human ambition and metaphysical guidance. The dynasty's survival depended on mastering both realms, blending strategy, ritual, and foresight into a coherent defense against threats that were constant, multifaceted, and often invisible. Even today, the legacy of these rivalries resonates in historical research and legend. Stories of secret alliances, covert betrayals, and daring interventions have been passed down, leaving traces of a world in which power was exercised as much through subtlety, intelligence, and foresight as through force. By understanding these conspiracies, we gain insight into the delicate mechanisms that allowed the Merovingians to endure, the careful orchestration of secrecy, the strategic use of hidden heirs, and the vigilance of those who operated unseen, safeguarding both prophecy and dynasty against the shadows of ambition. Ultimately, the shadow of conspiracy illustrates the extraordinary stakes faced by the Merovingians. Their survival was never guaranteed. It depended on the ability to anticipate, interpret, and respond to threats that were both human and mystical. Rival kings, ambitious nobles, and foreign powers tested the dynasty at every turn. Yet through secrecy, loyalty, and strategic foresight, the Merovingians maintained continuity, protected hidden heirs, and ensured that prophecy remained on course. In this dance of shadows, the dynasty's mastery of both visible authority and invisible guidance becomes clear. Power is not only exercised openly but preserved through vigilance, intelligence, and the careful navigation of intrigue. Among the most potent instruments of Merovingian influence were not armies, treaties, or even the careful orchestration of hidden heirs, but sacred relics, objects imbued with historical, spiritual, and symbolic power that shaped the destiny of the dynasty in ways both overt and subtle. These relics were far more than religious artifacts or ceremonial props. They were anchors of authority, tangible embodiments of legitimacy and prophecy. To possess a relic was to wield influence over perception, belief, and ultimately the course of history itself. Across Europe, rival factions recognized the weight of these objects, and their possession often determined alliances, inspired fear, and established hierarchy. The Merovingians accumulated a remarkable collection of relics over centuries, each with its own story, aura, and function. Some were remnants of saints, carefully preserved in ornate reliquaries. Others were symbolic objects linked to the dynasty's founding, hidden heirs, or sacred geography. Certain relics, described in manuscripts now lost, were believed to contain encoded knowledge, keys to the lost codex, prophetic guidance, or instructions for ritual performance. Others served as focal points for ceremonies, their presence transforming a simple ritual into an event that confirmed divine favor and legitimized royal authority. In essence, relics were instruments through which both the mystical and the political converged, reinforcing the dynasty's claim to destiny. Control over relics was closely guarded. They were stored in fortified chapels, secret chambers, or isolated monasteries, often accompanied by detailed instructions for their care, display, and use. Guardians trained in both ritual and cryptography ensured that relics were not misused or misinterpreted. A mishandled relic could diminish legitimacy, compromise ritual efficacy, or even invite perceived divine disfavor. Consequently, the management of these sacred objects required meticulous attention, blending religious devotion with strategic foresight. In the hands of the Merovingians, relics were active participants in governance, shaping decisions, alliances, and succession. Some relics served as instruments of influence over rival factions. Displayed publicly during ceremonies, they conveyed both spiritual and political authority. A jeweled chalice, a fragment of a saint's bone, or an ancient crown could signal divine sanction, discouraging insurrection, inspiring loyalty, or intimidating competitors. In other contexts, relics were wielded more subtly. Hidden from public view yet known to key players, they acted as silent guarantors of legitimacy, reminding allies and adversaries alike that the dynasty's power was rooted in forces beyond the merely temporal. These objects, small and delicate, became catalysts for influence, guiding the trajectory of events without uttering a single word. The mystical dimension of relics cannot be overstated. Chroniclers describe certain objects as conduits of vision, prophecy, or divine communication. Some relics were believed to respond to the presence of rightful heirs, glowing, resonating, or otherwise signaling approval. Others were used in ritual to reveal omens, validate decisions, or protect sacred knowledge. Their effects were not always visible or measurable, yet belief in their power was enough to influence human behavior decisively. In this sense, relics operated at the intersection of perception, psychology, and spirituality, amplifying the authority of those who possessed and understood them. Guardians of relics were often entrusted with cryptic instructions that extended beyond mere protection. They were instructed to position objects precisely during ceremonies, to display them only at specific moments, and to interpret subtle changes in their appearance or behavior. Some manuscripts hint at codes embedded in the relic's arrangement. A particular sequence of placement, orientation, or interaction might unlock knowledge, confer legitimacy, or guide strategic decision-making. This sophisticated system demonstrates the extent to which the Merovingians integrated sacred objects into both their mystical and political frameworks, using them to encode, transmit, and safeguard power. Rival factions understood the potency of these relics, often attempting to seize, replicate, or manipulate them. Wars, raids, and thefts frequently targeted religious and dynastic treasures, motivated by the belief that control over such objects could tilt the balance of power. Guardians responded with extraordinary measures, employing secrecy, deception, and diversion to protect the relics. In some cases, decoys were used, or relics were concealed beneath layers of protection to ensure that even the most cunning adversaries could not obtain them. These struggles reveal the extraordinary value placed on material symbols of authority, demonstrating that power in the Merovingian world was as much about perception and belief as it was about physical might. Some relics were linked directly to hidden heirs, serving as markers of identity, legitimacy, and destiny. A particular ring, pendant, or ceremonial tool might be entrusted to a young heir in secrecy, signaling both protection and recognition. These objects acted as reminders of lineage, prophecy, and responsibility, connecting the individual to centuries of dynastic history. The symbolic weight of such relics was profound, teaching heirs that their survival, authority, and role in history were intertwined with sacred objects whose power transcended the ordinary world. Relics also played a central role in ceremonies that reinforced the dynasty's control over perception. Coronations, oaths, and sacred gatherings were enhanced through the strategic display of these objects, linking human action to divine favor. The physical presence of a relic, shimmering in candlelight, displayed on a ceremonial altar, or held by a guardian, transformed ritual into spectacle, reinforcing the perception that the Merovingians' authority was ordained by forces beyond human comprehension. In this way, relics became both functional tools and psychological instruments, shaping belief, inspiring loyalty, and guiding the course of events. The interplay between relics and prophecy further magnified their significance. Some were believed to contain encoded messages, guiding decisions about heirs, alliances, or succession. Others were interpreted in conjunction with signs and omens, creating a complex system in which human action, divine guidance, and symbolic authority converged. This intricate network demonstrates the extraordinary sophistication of Merovingian strategy. The dynasty did not rely solely on brute force or political maneuvering, but on the careful integration of ritual, object, and interpretation to preserve its legacy and navigate the uncertainties of history. The pursuit and protection of relics generated drama, intrigue, and danger. Chroniclers recount tales of daring thefts, near captures, and secret relocations, painting a world in which a single object could determine the rise or fall of rulers. Guardians faced immense pressure, knowing that failure could compromise both prophecy and dynasty. The stakes extended far beyond the material. A relic lost or misused was a rupture in the continuity of destiny itself. Every movement, placement, and display required precision, vigilance, and foresight, emphasizing the profound responsibility borne by those who safeguarded the Merovingians' most potent instruments of power. Ultimately, the relics of the Merovingians were far more than historical curiosities. They were central to the dynasty's identity, survival, and mystique. Each object was a nexus of authority, spirituality, and prophecy, shaping both perception and action, guiding heirs, reinforcing loyalty, and deterring rivals. In a world where secrets, omens, and hidden heirs determined the fate of kingdoms, These relics were tangible expressions of invisible forces, anchoring the dynasty to a destiny both human and divine. Their story reminds us that history is often shaped not just by armies or treaties, but by the subtle, persistent influence of objects imbued with meaning, belief, and the power to shape human behavior. Beneath the grandeur of Merovingian courts, beneath the ceremonial pomp and displays of divine favor, lay a network that operated entirely in the shadows, secret societies dedicated to the preservation, protection, and guidance of the dynasty. These were not clubs or gatherings in the conventional sense. They were tightly woven networks of guardians, monks, knights, and advisors who understood that the survival of the dynasty depended on secrecy, vigilance, and unwavering loyalty. Every member was bound by oaths, rituals, and codes that transcended ordinary allegiance, often encompassing loyalty to prophecy itself rather than any single individual. The origins of these secret societies are shrouded in mystery. Some suggest that they predated the dynasty itself, emerging from early European mystical traditions or druidic lineages, later adapting to the Merovingian specific needs. Others claim that the first formal societies were established during the reign of Clovis, designed to manage both sacred relics and the hidden heirs whose protection was paramount. Regardless of their genesis, these networks operated with extraordinary discipline, their members trained in cryptography, surveillance, ritual, and combat. They existed in a delicate balance, visible only when necessary, yet influencing nearly every strategic decision of the dynasty. Membership was highly selective. Individuals were chosen not only for skill but for discretion, loyalty, and a capacity to interpret both human and mystical signals. Guardians were taught to read omens, analyze coded manuscripts, and understand the political landscape with unparalleled acuity. Monks trained in sacred texts acted as interpreters of prophecy and ceremonial law. Warriors and messengers were prepared to defend heirs and relics at all costs, operating in secrecy and often risking life and reputation for the continuity of the dynasty. Each member understood that failure was not merely personal. It could endanger the dynasty, the heirs, and the hidden threads of prophecy itself. The societies were layered and compartmentalized, designed to minimize risk in case of infiltration or betrayal. Certain members knew only a portion of the mission, unaware of the full scope of operations. Guardians protecting hidden heirs might not know the full contents of the codex, while scholars interpreting prophecy might be shielded from the location of sacred relics. This intricate system of compartmentalization ensured that even if one member were compromised, the dynasty's secrets remained protected. Communication relied on cryptic messages, coded symbols, and secret signals, blending intelligence, intuition, and ritual in ways that remain enigmatic to this day. The societies also managed the movement and concealment of sacred relics. Guardians oversaw the secure transfer of objects from monasteries to royal chapels, from hidden vaults to ceremonial displays. The logistics were complex, often involving decoy shipments, nighttime travel, and coordination across vast territories. Any lapse in vigilance could result in theft, desecration, or exposure, potentially destabilizing the dynasty's claim to divine favor. Members of the societies were constantly aware that the relics they protected were not mere artifacts, but active instruments of influence, guiding human behavior, consolidating loyalty, and reinforcing the perception of divine authority. Hidden heirs were another primary focus of these secret societies. Guardians operated covert networks to ensure the survival and eventual revelation of descendants whose existence was known only to a select few. Safe houses, secret monasteries, and even foreign courts were employed to shelter heirs from rivals. Training for these individuals was equally clandestine, emphasizing the skills and knowledge necessary to survive and fulfill the expectations of prophecy. Some heirs were raised in isolation, their tutors imparting lessons in strategy, ritual, and prophecy, preparing them for roles that would only emerge when timing, circumstance, and opportunity aligned. The societies also played a critical role in intelligence and counterintelligence. Rival kings, ambitious nobles, and foreign powers sought to exploit weaknesses in the dynasty, whether by discovering hidden heirs, stealing relics, or manipulating prophetic narratives. Guardians intercepted messages, monitored suspicious activity, and orchestrated interventions to preempt threats. Chronicles recount elaborate schemes in which the societies foiled conspiracies, diverted attention, or manipulated perception to protect the dynasty. These operations required meticulous planning, extraordinary patience, and an understanding of human psychology, reinforcing the notion that the true battlefield of Merovingian power often lay in the unseen realm of secrecy and influence. Ritual was deeply embedded within these societies' operations. Members performed ceremonies designed to reinforce loyalty, connect with prophecy, and consecrate the protection of heirs and relics. These rituals were both symbolic and practical, creating cohesion, discipline, and moral authority. In some cases, ceremonial acts served as tests, evaluating a member's dedication, judgment, and understanding of the dynasty's mysteries. In others, they were used to unlock encoded knowledge within the codex or to interpret signs and omens with greater clarity. Ritual thus intertwined the mystical, political, and practical, ensuring that members were not only guardians but active participants in the orchestration of destiny. The societies were not immune to internal tension. Differences in interpretation of prophecy, disagreements over strategic priorities, and personal ambition occasionally led to conflict. Yet these disputes were managed with extreme care, often resolved through secret councils, ritual mediation, or coded guidance from senior guardians. The ability to navigate internal dynamics was as essential as defending against external threats, reflecting the dual challenge of protecting the dynasty, managing human imperfection while safeguarding destiny itself. Historically, the society's influence extended beyond immediate protection. They shaped decisions on succession, diplomacy, and ceremonial practice, guiding the dynasty's trajectory through centuries of political instability. Their existence underscores a fundamental aspect of Merovingian power. Authority was exercised not only through public displays or military might, but through networks of secrecy, intelligence, and ritualized guidance. Without these societies, the codex, relics, and hidden heirs might have been lost, and with them, the dynasty's hold on prophecy and destiny. The legacy of these secret societies has echoed through history. Even as the dynasty declined and records became fragmented, legends of hidden guardians, coded manuscripts, and clandestine operations persisted. These tales reveal a world in which power was both visible and invisible, exercised openly and preserved in shadows, and where loyalty, secrecy, and mastery of knowledge determined the fate of kings, heirs, and nations. The societies embody the sophistication, foresight, and moral weight of the Merovingians, reminding us that survival often depended as much on intelligence, ritual, and discretion as on battlefields or crowns. Ultimately, the secret societies reveal a dynasty operating on multiple levels simultaneously: human, political, mystical, and prophetic. Guardians and members were entrusted not merely with protection but with the orchestration of destiny itself. Their vigilance, skill, and devotion ensured that relics remained secure, heirs survived, and prophecy unfolded according to plan. In understanding these societies, we glimpse the hidden architecture of Merovingian power, a realm in which secrecy, loyalty, and interpretation were the most potent weapons, and in which the unseen guardians of the dynasty held the fate of history in their hands. The survival and consolidation of the Merovingian dynasty were not secured by secrecy and prophecy alone. Blood was spilled on the battlefield, and every conflict shaped the fate of kings, heirs, and kingdoms. The dynasty's military campaigns were as much about strategic mastery as they were about fulfilling the dictates of prophecy and protecting the hidden threads of lineage. Each engagement, whether large-scale war or clandestine skirmish, was woven into the broader tapestry of political intrigue, ritual, and divine legitimacy, and the stakes were never merely territorial, they were existential. From the earliest reigns, Merovingian kings understood that military strength and political authority were inseparable. The kingdom's fragmented structure required vigilance against neighboring rivals, rebellious nobles, and opportunistic invaders. Every campaign demanded careful calculation. Alliances were formed and dissolved, spies and scouts were deployed, and the Council of Guardians, those versed in both strategy and prophecy, guided the decisions of kings. Battles were not fought solely with swords and spears. Intelligence, timing, and the ability to anticipate rival moves often determined the outcome before armies ever clashed on the field. The kings themselves often led their armies into battle, demonstrating courage, skill, and personal leadership. Chronicles describe sieges laid with meticulous precision, ambushes executed under cover of darkness, and decisive engagements where victory hung by a thread. Yet even in the heat of combat, prophecy and ritual remained intertwined. Priests, monks, and advisors interpreted omens, the flight of birds, celestial alignment, or the condition of sacred relics, to advise on the moment to attack or retreat. Success was not measured solely by territory gained, but by alignment with the invisible currents of destiny, ensuring that every victory reinforced both earthly and divine authority. Hidden heirs, too, were affected by the dynasty's military engagements. Guardians often evacuated heirs to safe locations before battles, employing secret routes, decoys, and loyal allies to protect them from harm. In some cases, heirs were present at the fringes of conflict, trained to observe and learn strategy, leadership, and the weight of responsibility. Battles became formative experiences, shaping not only the political landscape but the very character of the next generation of rulers. The survival of the dynasty was inseparable from the protection and preparation of those who would one day inherit its legacy. Rival kings posed constant threats, not only through open warfare but through covert manipulation of allies, mercenary bands, and internal dissent. Skirmishes could erupt into prolonged campaigns, often influenced by the timing of prophetic guidance or the perceived weakness of an heir. Chronicles recount instances in which battles were avoided or strategies altered, based on coded readings of the codex, signals from relics, or the counsel of secret guardians. Military engagement was thus a complex dance, blending raw force, calculated deception, and mystical insight into a single high-stakes performance. The geography of conflict also played a critical role. Dense forests, rivers, and mountainous terrain provided both obstacles and opportunities, allowing Merovingian commanders to use ambushes, defensive positions, and tactical retreats to their advantage. Guardians familiar with both land and legend guided troops, sometimes revealing hidden passages or advising on strategic positioning based on historical precedent or prophetic interpretation. Battles were as much about mastery of the natural world as about mastery of human adversaries, reflecting a deep integration of environmental awareness, strategy, and ritual observance. One recurring theme in Merovingian military history was the intersection of warfare and religious symbolism. Victories were often framed as divine favor, losses interpreted as warnings, and campaigns timed to align with sacred observances or prophetic signs. Priests and monks accompanied armies, performing rituals to bless troops, consecrate banners, and interpret omens in real time. This blending of martial, spiritual, and strategic elements reinforced the dynasty's authority, ensuring that each battle carried both immediate and long-term significance for legitimacy, morale, and political influence. The consequences of defeat were as instructive as the rewards of victory. When a campaign faltered, rival kings might attempt to capitalize on weakened authority, hidden heirs could be imperiled, and guardians faced the delicate task of preserving both prophecy and legacy under heightened threat. The dynasty's survival often depended on resilience, quick adaptation, and the ability to interpret setbacks as part of a broader strategic or prophetic framework. Chronicles describe daring counterattacks, secretive redeployments, and ingenious maneuvers that transformed apparent losses into long-term advantage, reflecting the dynasty's capacity to convert adversity into opportunity. Some battles were decisive not only for the territory won or lost but for the internal balance of power within the dynasty. The presence or absence of hidden heirs, the interpretation of the codex, and the influence of guardians could determine succession outcomes and consolidate authority. A single victory could strengthen loyalty among nobles, intimidate rivals, and validate the dynasty's claim to divine sanction, while a poorly managed engagement might ignite conspiracies, rebellions, or factional disputes. The battlefield thus became a crucible, testing not only martial skill but wisdom, foresight, and the integrity of both human and mystical institutions. The campaigns also reveal the extraordinary logistical and organizational sophistication of the Merovingians. Armies were coordinated across vast territories, supplies moved through secretive channels, and communication maintained through a network of scouts, messengers, and coded signals. The Guardians' guidance ensured that operations aligned with both strategic objectives and prophetic insight, while ritual observances maintained morale and reinforced loyalty. Each campaign was a synthesis of planning, execution, and interpretation, demonstrating the dynasty's ability to integrate diverse elements into a cohesive strategy for survival and dominance. Beyond the immediate military impact, these battles shaped the mythology of the dynasty. Chroniclers amplified victories, sometimes blending history with legend to highlight courage, divine favor, or prophetic fulfillment. Tales of miraculous interventions, hidden guidance, and heroic deeds became part of the cultural memory, reinforcing the dynasty's mystique and creating a narrative in which military action was inseparable from destiny. This narrative power extended influence beyond the battlefield, shaping perception, loyalty, and legitimacy across generations. The military campaigns of the Merovingians were not static. They evolved in response to new threats, changing political landscapes, and the growing sophistication of adversaries. Rival kings, foreign powers, and internal dissent required flexibility, innovation, and a willingness to adapt strategy in real time. Guardians played a pivotal role, interpreting the codex, advising on timing, and coordinating the protection of relics and hidden heirs even amidst chaos. The integration of prophecy, intelligence, and martial skill became a defining feature of the dynasty's approach, ensuring that each battle was fought with both earthly and metaphysical awareness. Ultimately, the battles that shaped the Merovingian dynasty reveal the inseparability of power, secrecy, and destiny. The visible clash of armies was only one layer. Beneath it lay networks of intelligence, guardianship, and prophetic guidance that ensured the dynasty's survival. Victory and defeat were not purely measured in casualties or territory, but in the continuity of lineage, the safeguarding of heirs, and the fulfillment of prophecy. The battlefield was thus both a physical and symbolic arena, a place where courage, strategy, and divine favor converged to determine the fate of kings, heirs, and the dynasty itself. The Merovingians' power was not only secured through prophecy, relics, and the battlefield. It was also forged in the quiet, intricate, and often treacherous realm of alliances, marriages, and betrayal. Dynastic marriages were far more than personal unions or social contracts. They were instruments of strategy, negotiation, and influence, binding kingdoms, nobles, and even foreign powers into webs that could either reinforce or undermine the dynasty. Each union carried with it the potential for loyalty, manipulation, or treachery, and the consequences could reverberate across generations. From the earliest reigns, Merovingian kings understood that marriage was a political weapon as potent as any sword. Alliances secured through marital ties could neutralize rival factions, create networks of loyalty, or legitimize territorial claims. Yet these bonds were fragile, contingent on human ambition, desire, and the subtle calculations of power. A single betrayal within the family or court could destabilize alliances, ignite conflict, or even expose hidden heirs to danger. Guardians and advisors were acutely aware of this, often guiding marriages, interpreting the symbolic significance of unions, and ensuring that the threads of prophecy remained intact. Some unions were orchestrated with meticulous attention to both political and mystical considerations. Guardians might consult the codex to determine auspicious pairings, identify the proper ceremonial timing, or evaluate compatibility in terms of dynastic prophecy. Certain marriages were believed to enhance the potency of relics, consolidate spiritual authority, or reinforce sacred connections between kingdoms. In these cases, unions were less about personal affection and more about the alignment of human and divine currents, transforming the act of marriage into a strategic, almost ritualistic exercise. Betrayal was an ever-present danger. Even carefully arranged alliances could unravel, as personal ambition, envy, and greed disrupted the carefully orchestrated plans of kings and guardians. Rivals, both inside and outside the dynasty, often exploited marital ties to gain access to secrets, claim territories, or manipulate succession. Some chroniclers describe tragic cases in which marriages designed to secure loyalty instead facilitated coups, assassinations, or the exposure of hidden heirs. In such moments, the line between personal and political became dangerously thin, illustrating the high stakes inherent in these arrangements. The complexity of alliances extended beyond immediate family ties. Nobles, clergy, and even foreign rulers became enmeshed in a network of interrelated loyalties, each with its own agenda and potential for treachery. Guardians monitored these relationships closely, interpreting subtle shifts in behavior, decoding messages, and anticipating moves that might threaten the dynasty. Intelligence gathered through these networks was critical, allowing the Merovingians to preempt conspiracies, negotiate favorable outcomes, or adjust ceremonial and strategic actions to maintain the balance of power. Hidden heirs were especially vulnerable in the world of alliances. Their existence could be a secret known only to guardians and a few trusted nobles, and a single misstep in marital or political negotiation could compromise their safety. Guardians went to extraordinary lengths to protect these individuals, coordinating with loyal allies across kingdoms and using marriage as both a shield and a tool. In some cases, marriages were arranged to create safe havens or to embed heirs in positions where they could be protected while remaining inconspicuous. The intersection of marital diplomacy and covert protection created a delicate, high-stakes environment in which every decision carried profound consequences. Marriage and alliance also intersected with the mystical dimensions of the dynasty. Certain unions were believed to enhance prophetic fulfillment, strengthen the influence of relics, or ensure the continuity of sacred bloodlines. Guardians and advisors often interpreted celestial events, omens, and passages from the codex to guide these arrangements, blending spiritual guidance with practical strategy. The result was a system in which human relationships were infused with symbolic and mystical significance, transforming personal bonds into instruments of destiny and reinforcing the dynasty's extraordinary grip on both perception and power. Rival factions frequently sought to exploit the vulnerability inherent in marital arrangements. A king or noble could be persuaded, bribed, or coerced into betraying a union, revealing secrets, or undermining loyalty. Intrigue often played out over years, with rival alliances forming and dissolving, marriages arranged and annulled, and trust constantly tested. In this environment, the guardian's role was critical. They acted as arbiters, protectors, and interpreters, ensuring that alliances served the dynasty's long-term survival rather than the short-term ambitions of any individual. Historical accounts suggest that some of the dynasty's most pivotal moments were shaped by marriage and betrayal. Battles were fought, treaties negotiated, and political power shifted as a direct consequence of unions that either solidified loyalty or revealed treachery. The pattern of alliances often determined the trajectory of succession, the exposure of hidden heirs, and the preservation of sacred relics. In this way, marriages were far more than personal or ceremonial. They were central to the operation of power, strategy, and prophecy within the Merovingian world. Cinematically, these alliances were scenes of both grandeur and tension. Lavish ceremonies masked underlying suspicion, while whispered conversations in shadowed corridors revealed plots and loyalties in delicate balance. A single word, a glance, or a gesture could shift allegiance, foreshadow betrayal, or alter the fate of an heir. The contrast between the outward display of harmony and the hidden currents of ambition created a constant tension, reinforcing the dynasty's need for vigilance, strategic foresight, and the guidance of prophecy. The emotional stakes were profound. For the kings, alliances could secure their reign and protect their heirs. Yet they also introduced the possibility of personal betrayal, heartbreak, and political humiliation. For hidden heirs, marriages orchestrated by guardians could determine survival, shaping their identities, responsibilities, and destiny in ways they might only fully understand years later. For rival nobles, alliances offered both opportunity and danger, requiring careful navigation to avoid ruin. Every union was a microcosm of the broader struggle for power, legitimacy, and the fulfillment of prophecy. In the broader context of European politics, these marriages and alliances had ripple effects that extended far beyond the Merovingian court. Dynastic ties connected kingdoms, influenced trade, shaped military coalitions, and even affected ecclesiastical authority. Rival rulers had to consider not only the immediate consequences of alliances, but also the hidden networks, guardians, and prophetic imperatives that guided Merovingian decisions. The dynasty's ability to leverage marriage and covert alliances as instruments of strategy was a testament to their sophisticated understanding of power, both human and mystical. Ultimately, the story of the Merovingians' alliances is one of complexity, foresight, and high-stakes diplomacy. Every marriage, every pact, and every act of betrayal was woven into a broader narrative of survival, prophecy, and influence. These relationships were not merely personal or political. They were instruments of destiny, shaping the trajectory of the dynasty across generations and creating a legacy in which human ambition, loyalty, and foresight intersected with the invisible currents of prophecy and divine favor. In understanding these alliances, we glimpse the intricate mechanisms through which the Merovingians navigated both the visible and unseen forces that governed their world. The history of the Merovingians is often viewed as a slow decline, a dynasty gradually overtaken by rivals, clergy, and circumstance. Yet beneath the surface, a remarkable narrative of resilience and resurgence unfolds. A story of near destruction, cunning survival, and quiet resurrection that preserved the dynasty's influence long after it appeared to fade from the political stage. These moments of peril, where the dynasty teetered on the brink of collapse, reveal both the fragility and the extraordinary ingenuity that allowed the Merovingians to endure. Crisis often emerged from multiple directions simultaneously. Internal strife within the royal family threatened succession. Hidden heirs were at risk from jealous nobles or ambitious rivals, and external powers sought to capitalize on perceived weakness. At times, a king's authority might be undermined by betrayal, assassination, or strategic alliances against him. Battles could be lost, territories seized, and sacred relics endangered, creating an atmosphere in which the survival of the dynasty required not just military skill, but intelligence, foresight, and the subtle orchestration of political, mystical, and ceremonial strategies. One of the dynasty's most critical survival strategies involved concealment and adaptation. Hidden heirs, who carried the genetic and symbolic continuity of the Merovingian line, were moved in secret across kingdoms, sheltered in monasteries, or placed in the care of loyal guardians. These relocations were not random. They were carefully coordinated with intelligence gathered from spies, coded instructions from the codex, and assessments of political risk. In some cases, heirs were intentionally obscured from view, appearing as ordinary nobles or clergy to outsiders, ensuring that rival factions could not exploit their existence. Survival depended as much on invisibility and discretion as on courage or strength. The guardians and secret societies played a decisive role during these precarious times. Their members orchestrated covert operations to protect relics, safeguard heirs, and neutralize threats without drawing attention. They employed espionage, misdirection, and deception, often manipulating perception to create the illusion of weakness, disinterest, or absence. Rivals might believe a kingdom had fallen, only to find that the Merovingians had quietly regrouped, repositioned, and prepared to strike back. These operations required extraordinary discipline, coordination, and loyalty, revealing that the dynasty's true strength lay in its ability to operate unseen, leveraging secrecy as a weapon against both human ambition and unpredictable fate. Periods of near collapse were also marked by strategic alliances forged in the shadows. Marriages, oaths, and pacts were employed to stabilize power, protect heirs, or counter threats, often without public knowledge. Guardians monitored these alliances carefully, ensuring that each relationship served the broader goal of survival rather than immediate advantage. Betrayals were anticipated, contingencies planned, and redundancies established so that no single failure could imperil the dynasty. The orchestration of these hidden networks reveals the extraordinary sophistication of Merovingian strategy, blending human foresight with mystical guidance and prophetic instruction. Relics and the codex were central to these survival efforts. Sacred objects, carefully concealed, provided both symbolic and practical support, reinforcing legitimacy even when the dynasty appeared vulnerable. The codex guided decisions, indicating the timing of key actions, the selection of allies, and the measures necessary to safeguard heirs. In this context, both relics and manuscripts were more than historical curiosities. They were active instruments of continuity, shaping decisions, influencing perception, and ensuring that prophecy could unfold even in moments of extreme crisis. The emotional intensity of these periods cannot be overstated. Guardians, heirs, and rulers faced constant threat, balancing fear with determination, secrecy with decisive action, and loyalty with prudence. Mistakes could lead to exposure, loss of life, or permanent weakening of the dynasty. Yet amidst these pressures, moments of courage, ingenuity, and quiet heroism emerged. A single guardian might deflect an assassination attempt, a clever deception might mislead a rival army, or a timely interpretation of the codex might avert disaster. The narrative of survival is thus interwoven with suspense, risk, and human drama, reflecting the extraordinary demands placed on those entrusted with the dynasty's continuity. Even when the Merovingians suffered temporary setbacks, they often demonstrated remarkable resilience. Territories lost in battle were sometimes reclaimed through diplomacy or covert action. Rivals were neutralized through strategic marriages or alliances, and hidden heirs eventually emerged to reinforce legitimacy. Each apparent failure contained the seeds of recovery, revealing the dynasty's capacity to adapt, endure, and turn adversity into opportunity. The story of survival was not linear. It was a series of calculated moves, each informed by intelligence, prophecy, and the careful orchestration of people, objects, and events. The dynasty's capacity for resurrection also relied on the perception of continuity. Even when political authority seemed weakened, the careful preservation of relics, ceremonial rituals, and symbolic acts maintained the appearance of legitimacy. Nobles, allies, and even common subjects were influenced by these symbols, interpreting them as evidence that the Merovingians remained protected by divine favor. This psychological dimension of survival underscores the dynasty's sophisticated understanding of human behavior, illustrating how belief, perception, and ritual could be leveraged to preserve power even in moments of extreme vulnerability. Historical records hint at dramatic episodes in which the dynasty narrowly escaped obliteration. Assassination plots were foiled, hidden heirs were spirited away under cover of darkness, and rival armies were misled through deception and misdirection. In each case, survival depended on the careful interplay of secrecy, intelligence, ritual, and courage. Chronicles describe moments in which a seemingly minor action, a disguised messenger, a hidden code, or a symbolic gesture, had disproportionate consequences, saving the dynasty from collapse and setting the stage for eventual resurgence. These moments highlight the delicate balance between chance, skill, and foresight that defined the Merovingians' survival strategy. The narrative of fall and resurrection also illuminates the dynasty's psychological resilience. Kings, guardians, and heirs were trained not only in strategy and ritual but in the art of patience, observation, and calculated risk. Endurance in the face of repeated setbacks became a defining characteristic, ensuring that even prolonged adversity could be transformed into opportunity. The Merovingians understood that survival was a long game, in which careful preparation, loyalty, and mastery of both human and mystical forces were far more decisive than brute force alone. Ultimately, the story of the dynasty's survival is a testament to the power of secrecy, strategy, and foresight. By safeguarding hidden heirs, preserving sacred relics, interpreting prophecy, and orchestrating covert operations, the Merovingians maintained continuity in the face of extraordinary challenges. Their ability to recover from near destruction demonstrates that true strength often lies not in apparent power but in the skillful coordination of knowledge, loyalty, and timing. In understanding these episodes, we glimpse the extraordinary mechanisms through which a dynasty navigated peril, preserved its legacy, and ensured that prophecy continued to unfold across generations. In the end, the fall and resurrection of the Merovingians offers a profound lesson. History is rarely determined solely by visible power or overt authority. Sometimes, the most decisive battles are fought in secrecy, guided by intelligence, ritual, and foresight, and the survival of a lineage depends as much on human ingenuity, courage, and loyalty as on armies and fortresses. The dynasty's ability to endure against all odds remains a defining testament to their mastery of the unseen forces that shaped Europe, reminding us that the most extraordinary stories are often hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. The Merovingians relied on a network of hidden guardians whose purpose was nothing less than the preservation of a dynasty through centuries of danger and upheaval. These individuals operated in shadows, protecting heirs, sacred relics, and secret knowledge from enemies and opportunists. Their vigilance ensured that even as kings fell and empires shifted, the continuity of lineage and prophecy remained intact. Guardians were more than mere bodyguards. They were scholars, strategists, and custodians of wisdom. They trained heirs in secrecy, interpreted cryptic texts, and safeguarded relics with meticulous care. In doing so, they became the unseen architects of survival, orchestrating events in ways that would only reveal their significance generations later. Their loyalty and foresight were the silent backbone of the dynasty, enabling the Merovingians to endure despite political instability and external threats. The psychological burden carried by these guardians was immense. They lived under constant threat, balancing secrecy with action, often at great personal risk. Their decisions were guided by a mix of pragmatic strategy and belief in prophecy, creating a blend of logic and faith that defined the dynasty's survival mechanisms. Through their actions, the Merovingians demonstrated that power is not only wielded openly through armies and thrones, but also preserved quietly through dedication, intelligence, and foresight. The hidden guardians ensured that the dynasty's legacy could outlast fleeting power, leaving clues for those perceptive enough to follow the traces across time. Their story is a testament to the enduring strength of loyalty, courage, and strategic vision, silently shaping history from the shadows. The Merovingians understood the immense influence of symbols and sacred relics. Every artifact, inscription, and ceremonial object carried meaning beyond its immediate appearance, encoding messages of legitimacy, prophecy, and lineage. Relics were not merely spiritual. They were instruments of influence, carefully curated to maintain authority across generations. Sacred objects, from intricately carved chalices to cryptic manuscripts, were hidden or entrusted to loyal custodians, often placed in remote sanctuaries or secret chambers. Their survival required planning, secrecy, and foresight, reflecting the dynasty's strategic mind. These items connected rulers to divine authority, reinforcing their legitimacy and shaping perceptions of power in a world governed by both faith and politics. Symbols in architecture, carvings, and ceremonial spaces served similar purposes. Hidden meanings within churches, abbeys, and fortresses conveyed messages only interpretable by those initiated in the dynasty's traditions. The Merovingians wove a visual and spiritual language into the landscape itself, ensuring that even after their political decline, their influence remained tangible. These relics and symbols were also tools of continuity. They guided heirs, inspired loyalty among followers, and preserved knowledge for future generations. The dynasty's careful orchestration of tangible and symbolic power ensured that their presence endured in both material and mystical forms. Today, these relics remain as enigmatic reminders of the dynasty's ingenuity, inviting reflection on the unseen ways influence, faith, and strategy intersected to create a legacy that continues to captivate historians and enthusiasts alike. Even centuries after their apparent decline, the Merovingians' influence quietly persists. Archaeological discoveries, hidden manuscripts, genealogical traces, and sacred relics all hint at a dynasty that mastered the art of subtle, enduring power. Their foresight ensured that knowledge, heirs, and relics could survive beyond immediate threats, leaving traces for those willing to look closely. Hidden chambers, secret passageways, and symbolic architecture reveal a calculated approach to survival. The dynasty understood that power is as much about perception as reality. By controlling what could be seen and protecting what could not, they shaped events silently and effectively. Modern explorers and historians occasionally uncover these traces, reinforcing the idea that the Merovingians' influence extends far beyond the history books. Genealogical whispers suggest that some bloodlines may still carry hidden threads of the dynasty, subtly influencing alliances, marriages, and legacies. Manuscripts and folklore preserve coded messages and references to prophetic guidance, blending legend with historical reality. Even popular fascination, in literature, film, and documentaries, reflects the enduring intrigue of a dynasty that combines strategy, secrecy, and spiritual authority. The modern echoes of the Merovingians remind us that legacy is not always obvious. Influence can persist quietly across centuries, preserved by careful planning, loyalty, and foresight. The dynasty's story challenges us to see beyond the surface, to consider hidden currents of power, and to marvel at the intelligence, strategy, and subtlety that allowed a dynasty to endure in the shadows long after its visible reign ended. The Merovingian story reveals that history is rarely what it seems. Beyond kings, armies, and visible power, their true influence lay in secrecy, prophecy, and strategic foresight. Guardians protected heirs, relics, and knowledge, orchestrating events over generations to ensure the dynasty's survival. Every decision was guided by long-term vision, blending human intelligence with mystical insight. This hidden legacy teaches patience and resilience. Even during apparent decline, the Merovingians' networks allowed them to endure, subtly shaping European history. The interplay between fate and human action was central. Prophecy provided guidance, but human courage, loyalty, and planning ensured fulfillment. Hidden heirs, sacred relics, and secret councils illustrate that influence often operates quietly, far from public view. The dynasty also demonstrates the power of subtlety. Success was measured not in immediate domination but in long-term preservation of knowledge, lineage, and legitimacy. Modern echoes, traces of relics, manuscripts, and genealogies, show that even centuries later, the dynasty's foresight continues to influence culture and perception. Ultimately, the Merovingians challenge us to reconsider what we know about history. They remind us that hidden forces often shape events, that foresight and patience are forms of power, and that the most enduring legacies may be invisible. Their story invites reflection. What secrets lie beneath the surface of history, waiting to be discovered by those willing to look closely enough? Centuries after their political reign ended, the Merovingians' influence quietly persists. Relics, manuscripts, and hidden sanctuaries scattered across Europe offer tangible proof of a dynasty that understood the power of secrecy. Some relics have surfaced in private collections or churches, often with obscure origins, hinting at centuries of careful preservation by loyal guardians. Architecture and geography also carry their mark. Underground chambers, crypts, and symbolic carvings reflect a sophisticated understanding of space as both practical and mystical. Even genealogical traces suggest that hidden heirs may have persisted, subtly shaping alliances and lineage. Folklore and manuscripts preserve cryptic hints of the dynasty's strategies and prophetic guidance, blurring the line between myth and history. The modern fascination with the Merovingians in literature, film, and scholarship reflects a broader curiosity about hidden power. Their survival was rooted in patience, foresight, and the quiet orchestration of events. Even today, discoveries of relics, tunnels, or manuscripts remind us that history is layered. The visible is only part of the story, while unseen forces continue to shape outcomes. The dynasty's echoes encourage reflection on legacy. True influence extends beyond immediate visibility. The Merovingians show that careful preservation, secrecy, and strategic foresight allow ideas, bloodlines, and power to endure far longer than apparent reigns. Their story reminds us that the past is never fully gone. It persists in subtle, often hidden ways, waiting for those attentive enough to trace its lasting impact. The Merovingian story concludes not with an end, but with reflection. Their influence was not measured by armies or crowns alone, but by foresight, secrecy, and careful orchestration. Guardians, hidden heirs, and sacred relics worked together to ensure continuity, shaping Europe's history in ways that remain partially unseen. This legacy teaches that true power often lies in subtlety. Prophecy-guided decisions, but human action, courage, loyalty, and strategic planning gave it effect. The dynasty endured through hidden networks, long-term foresight, and meticulous preservation of knowledge, demonstrating that resilience and influence are deliberate acts, not accidents of history. Modern echoes, relics, manuscripts, genealogies, and architecture remind us that even centuries later, the dynasty's impact persists. They challenge us to look beyond the surface, to question accepted narratives, and to appreciate the hidden forces that shape events. Their story invites reflection on how influence operates quietly, invisibly, and patiently across generations. Ultimately, the Merovingians leave us with a haunting thought. Much of history is hidden, shaped by unseen currents and careful orchestration. Their legacy is both a historical lesson and a philosophical challenge, urging us to see beyond the obvious, to consider what lies beneath, and to marvel at the enduring ingenuity of a dynasty that mastered the delicate balance of secrecy, foresight, and human courage.